Here are 10 terrifying ghosts from Japan that will haunt you. Number 10 is Yuki Onna. One of the most famous ghosts in Japan is the Yuki Onna. This spirit has appeared in Japanese folklore for hundreds of years, and most chillingly of all, has been encountered in recent decades. The Yuki Onna appears to be a ghost made of ice which yearns to be part of the mortal world. Often, it appears as a beautiful woman and has even been known to marry mortal men. In some of the most terrifying descriptions of the Yuki Onna, it would appear during a blizzard holding a child. It would then scream for help. Villagers would go out in search of the screaming woman. If a man found the Yuki Onna, he would lift the woman and the child out of the snow, only to find that they would suddenly weigh down on him. He would then sink into the snow and be hidden forever by the ice, entombed with the Yuki Onna and her offspring. Number 9 is the Oiwa. Oiwa is a Japanese spirit which even the most hardened paranormal investigators should avoid. This entity is a spirit of the dead fueled by vengeance. Other similar spirits known as Onryo haunt the Japanese landscapes, but Oiwa is the most famous, giving her name to the legend of Oiwa and Tamiya. Some believe this to be the most famous Japanese ghost of all time. In the story, a woman named Oiwa is pregnant and happily married. Unfortunately, her husband wishes to marry another woman for money and plots to kill his wife. He poisons Oiwa, which scars her face, and then later pushes her off of a cliff. Over time, the ghostly figure of Oiwa haunts the husband until he runs to the same cliff, where witnesses claim they've seen the husband's tortured figure being thrown over the edge by an apparition with a scarred face. Number 8 is the Funa Yuri. As one of the most famous island countries in the world with a rich supernatural tradition, it's no surprise that stories of horrifying spirits haunting the seas are commonplace in and around Japan. These spirits are called Funa-yuri and are still seen to this day, terrorizing those who dare to enter the water. The Funa-yuri are said to be the remnants of people who died in shipwrecks and who are so jealous of the living that they want to drag them down into the depths with them. Some of these ghosts appear as malevolent white figures floating above the water, while others are said to be like ethereal lights searching the sea for victims. In some of the most frightening accounts, these fragmented spirits have been seen walking around on the decks of ships, attacking people and trying to fill the vessels with water. Number 7 is the Konaki Jiji. Some Japanese ghosts prey on those with good natures. An example of this is the Konaki Jiji. This horrifying spirit lures people in by appearing to be a frail old man, or even an abandoned child. It cries out for help when someone is nearby, especially in remote locations such as forests or among the hills. Much like the Yuki Onna, the Konaki Jiji wants to attract a passerby, but in this case, it is not to attract a mate, but rather to bring about their death. When a person puts their arm around the old man to help him walk, or they lift up the crying child, the ghost immediately transforms into a huge stone. The stone then crushes the helpless person. Some believe the Konaki Jiji are the spirits of those who were lost in the wilderness and never made it out alive. Why they feel the need to prey on the living, however, to this day remains a mystery. Number 6 is the Itan Momen. The Itan Momen is one of the strangest and most feared supernatural entities in Japan. Most spirits are depicted as human figures, but this creature is something very different. It's often described as a cloth-like object in a burial shroud which hides out of view. At night, it slowly moves around the ground until it can find its victim. When it does, it climbs up the victim's legs and then wraps itself around the face of them so the prey cannot breathe. In recent years, many people have reported encountering this strange entity. In some of the most shocking descriptions, the Itan covers the entire body of its victims and then drags them off into the darkness. When this happens, the victim is never heard from again. Rumors persist that when grabbed by the cloth, spectral hands can be felt grabbing at the body out of view. Number 5 is Oni. The Oni are some of the most fearsome supernatural creatures in all of Japan. Depictions of these entities go back thousands of years, with the word Oni originally meaning spirit of the dead. As the true nature of these creatures was revealed, the name Oni came to mean to hide or conceal, because Oni spirits are hidden from human eyes until they attack. Descriptions vary, but Oni are usually described as being huge, lumbering entities with horns emerging from their heads and long yellowed claws on their hands. In some encounters, people have described how Oni spirits have a third eye on their foreheads. The Oni are considered so dangerous that some Japanese architects have designed their buildings to have L-shaped indentations, which are said to confuse and ward off Oni demons when they appear. Number 4 is the Namahage. In northern Honshu, old stories insist that frightening demonic ghosts called the Namahage lie in wait for those unwilling to believe in the supernatural. It's said that on the first full moon of the new year, the foreboding spirits of the Namahage rise from their resting places and come down from the surrounding mountains to punish the wicked. They enter homes and whisper with ominous voices, "Are there any crybabies here?" It is then that they punish the children who misbehave. While more modern traditions depict the Namahage as ogre-like in appearance, the true origin of these creatures reveals them to be powerful kami spirits. The name Namahage can be translated to mean fire rash peeling, which gives a horrible impression, not only of how these demons appear, but what they do to their victims when they find them. Number 3 is the Kuchisake Onna. One of the most frightening things about Japanese ghost story traditions is that they do not simply remain curious artifacts of the past. Sightings of terrifying spirits who prey upon the living continue to this day, with our modern minds struggling to understand these malevolent entities. The Kuchisake Onna is an ominous example of a ghostly apparition which haunts the empty halls of darkened bedrooms of the 21st century. This spirit often covers its jaw with a mask or piece of cloth. It approaches those unlucky enough to cross paths with it and asks a simple question: "Do you find me attractive?" If the passerby answers no, the ghost removes its mask to reveal that its mouth is horribly disfigured. The Kuchisake Onna then attacks its innocent victim, leaving them with the same horrible scars. Number 2 is the Amazake Baba. While many ghosts found in Japan prey on those while traveling, it would be a mistake to think that the comfort of your home can protect you from malevolent spirits. One ghost, known as the Amazake Baba, waits until you're at home before revealing its evil. This ghost comes to the doors of houses late at night. If you happen to answer, you'll be faced with the figure of an old woman. The ghost then opens its mouth and in a strange, twisted voice, which sounds more like that of a child, asks to be given some amazake. This is a traditional Japanese drink. However, regardless of whether the drink is brought to her or not, the damage is already done. It's said that anyone who opens their door to the Amazake Baba soon collapses with a mysterious, incurable illness. And number 1 is Tenome. Of all the frightening stories of ghostly encounters in Japan, the account of a type of spirit known as a tenome is easily the most unnerving. This spirit appears as an old man, which from a distance looks lost and harmless. In one recorded incident, a young man who was dared to enter a graveyard at night saw such a figure standing by a grave. When he approached the man to see if he was lost, the ghost turned to reveal that it had no eyes. As the tenome screamed and held out its arms, the young man recoiled in horror to see that the ghost's eyes were embedded in the palms of its hands, looking at him. The young man ran and found a temple where he asked a priest to hide him from the ghost. The priest put the young man inside of a chest, but the Tenome soon appeared. When the priest opened the chest, all that was left of the young man was his skin. Number 10 is an old enemy. It's nice to receive a message from an old friend, but what would you do if you received a message from a malevolent ghost which used to terrorize you as a child? That's exactly what happened to a woman named Judy in 2016. When Judy was a child, she had a number of frightening encounters with a vengeful spirit at her family home. After moving away and having a family, Judy believed that ominous episode of her life was behind her. Unfortunately, this was far from the truth. Out of the blue, she began to receive strange voicemail messages. The voice on the phone had a sneering, angry sound, and it was speaking in garbled words. Despite this, Judy recognized the voice as that of the spirit which haunted her as a child. When someone cleaned up the audio recordings, they found a chilling message which simply whispered, "Go to the house." Number 9 is a strange origin. According to one Reddit poster, there is a specific nighttime call which you definitely do not want to receive. The man was woken up at 4:50 a.m. in the morning by his phone ringing. By the time he got to it, a voicemail message had been left. The message sounded like a distorted human voice masked by interference. The recording was extremely creepy, so he wanted to find out where it came from. Luckily, the caller hadn't masked their number. After a little research, he discovered that the number came from an old funeral home in Hawaii, which was no longer operating. Other Reddit users listened to the recording and realized they had received a similar strange call, with some speculating that one of the funeral home's deceased customers was trying to get a message out to the living. Number 8 is a new theory. There are people who believe that poltergeists are not actual ghosts and were never human in the first place. This perspective has been given more credence since a handful of psychics attempted to make contact with one such entity, the Bell Witch. When they did, they discovered that the entity was very strange indeed. The psychics were able to visualize a location attached to the spirit. The spirit was sending messages from there out into the world. However, the location was very bizarre. At first, it appeared to be a tomb, but upon closer inspection, the visions of this place appeared to be more like a piece of technology, like a computer server room. Some have speculated that messages come from some form of ancient artificial intelligence trapped somewhere, but so far, no one has been able to make consistent contact. Number 7 is the Great Silence. Stage theaters are often filled with stories of paranormal encounters, unseen footsteps, phantom apparitions sitting in their favorite seats, and even ghostly voices. For the most part, these events are not about communicating with the living, but in one instance, an actor was contacted by a supernatural entity frustrated with being ignored. One day while the production crew were working backstage, one of the actors was alone out front. As he stood there, he heard a series of thumps and bangs, as though someone was hitting their fists off the walls. Suddenly, a man's voice appeared out of thin air to the actor and shouted, "Can't you hear me?" After this, other members of the cast and crew heard footsteps and strange noises around the theater. The spirit was trying to communicate, but unfortunately, only its frustration was heard loud and clear. Number 6 is Say That Again. If you have a phone, that means that you can record audio, and this has resulted in many people picking up bizarre voices which seem disembodied and almost human. There are hundreds of thousands of such recordings, and often the messages left are short phrases seemingly provided from the spirit world to convey meaning. However, in some situations, the alleged spirits repeat themselves over and over again, as though they're not being understood. One paranormal investigator from Buckinghamshire, England, has recorded the same message in a variety of different locations. What's more, the message is being spoken by different voices. No one knows what the spirits are referring to, but they seem intent on telling the researcher something important. The message is clear and simple and says, "Never again." But what that means exactly remains a mystery. Number 5 is a family reunion. We all have to experience losing someone we love at some point in our lives, and when it does happen, we search for meaning in the hopes that they are still out there somewhere. But while we may pray and hope that there's something after death, we don't expect a direct answer. In 2016, a Redditor received an eerie answer to her prayers, captured forever in the form of a voicemail message. The caller's number didn't make any sense. It was a series of zeros and no other digits. When the woman then listened to the recording, she was traumatized. A familiar voice came through. It was the voice of her father. He kept repeating the words, "This is Dad," in the message, along with "I was trying to contact you." While the daughter was happy to receive the message, it still unnerved her to think that she'd been contacted by the ghost of her father. Number 4 is the slumber party. Many years ago, a girl named Abby was attending a slumber party at her friend's home. The group of girls were in the 8th grade at the time, and while they were having fun, they decided to try to scare each other. To do this, one of the girls suggested going into the basement and carrying out a seance. While standing in the basement with the lights off, they discussed who they should summon. One of the girls then said Jack the Ripper. At this suggestion, Abby felt a shiver. She whispered, "No, we shouldn't summon something evil." In response, the disembodied voice of a grown man spoke loudly from the darkness in agreement. The voice said, "That's right." The girls ran from the basement, but there was no one else there. It seemed that something supernatural was listening to them and had given them a profound, ominous warning. Number 3 is a different kind of message. There are many ways to communicate with each other. We can write or speak our words or even use our body language. But since ghosts have no body of their own, they sometimes have to use other, more sinister means. In one such instance, an online poster told their frightening story of being contacted by the dead. The house she used to live in was old and had a creepy atmosphere. She and her roommate often felt as though something else lived in the house. One night, the girl saw a patch of water on the floor in the house, and then found her roommate in a frightened state in the other room. He had been walking through a part of the house carrying a glass of water and felt something invisible push him. When they returned to the patch of water, it had changed shape into a perfect human hand. The ghost's message was loud and clear: "This is my house." Number 2 is an unhealthy fixation. For most paranormal investigators, receiving messages from a ghost would be the holy grail of paranormal research. However, it all depends on the kind of messages you're receiving. Posting to the True Ghost Stories subreddit, one user was concerned that there was an active spirit at their home. The activity began with unexplained rattling noises coming from the bathroom, along with the door slamming shut on its own. Soon the spirit began communicating directly. Every time the Redditor was in the shower, he would come out to see strange messages written on his mirror in steam. The messages included his name and a love heart. At first, he thought the spirit was in love with him, but over time he began to worry that it wanted to consume him completely. Now, he rarely sleeps at night and listens out for rattling and footsteps in his bathroom. And number 1 is You Rang. One popular way to receive messages from ghosts is through the use of a Ouija board. Also known as a spirit board, these communication devices are considered a trivial game by some, and by others, a direct way to communicate with demonic forces. In one reported incident, a high school student and his friends decided to use a Ouija board to see if anything would happen. Soon, they began to receive messages from a ghost calling itself Fred. Shortly after, one of the students received a message with a number which wasn't familiar to them. When they called the number, a man answered by simply saying, "This is Fred." They soon found out that the man was very much alive, but worried for him as the Ouija board had mentioned that Fred died in a car accident. No one knows if the message was a warning or, at worst, a threat from beyond the grave. Number 10 is a truly wild fire. Just after 1 p.m. on November 25th, 2015, a dash cam in a fire truck responding to the Pinery bushfire in southwest Australia captured footage of what it's like to accidentally find yourself in the heart of a wildfire. The firefighters, who were speeding along in an attempt to stop the blaze, were unaware that the wind had changed directions and that the inferno was suddenly barreling down in their direction. In the video, seconds after they realize the blaze is coming, it sweeps across the road, causing utter chaos as fire trucks collide into one another, trying to escape the flames. The fire engulfs the road and spreads to both sides in an instant. The blaze would continue to rip through the countryside for another 6 days and burn more than 210,000 acres of scrub as well as farmland. Number 9 is Bigfoot. On May 15, 2009, 2 Georgia State police officers were driving down a dark rural road around 8:30 p.m. when their dash cam captured a dark figure striding across the road in front of them. In the grainy clip, the officers react to the unidentified figure with disbelief and turn the cruiser around to get a second look. Upon returning to the scene, an officer can be seen exiting the car with her flashlight to investigate something moving in the bush. You can hear the officer calling out as he searches, but no one answers. After a moment, the officer returns to the car to search the surrounding area for houses. The officers can be heard discussing what the figure could have been as they drive. Was it a bear mysteriously walking on 2 legs, or a harmless prank by some locals, or Bigfoot himself? Number 8 is 18-wheeler group robbery. Just after 10 p.m. on September 6, 2016, a trucker driving an 18-wheeler down a dark one-way road found his path blocked by several large branches on the road. As he approached the roadblock, his dash camera caught a large group of people swarming over the barriers on the sides of the street and advancing towards his truck from the front and the rear. In the clip, the driver reverses away from the obstruction as people outside began hurling rocks at him in an attempt to break the windows and rob him. He then realizes that there are people behind his truck too, preventing him from backing away to safety, so he decides to risk possible damage to his tires and accelerates forward over the branches. The driver escaped the attack, but we are left to wonder, what was he carrying that so many would want to steal? Number 7 is the girl on the highway. In Singapore, on a seemingly ordinary drive down a well-lit Upper Bukit Timah road one evening, a dash cam suddenly captured a ghostly woman seemingly floating in the middle of the street. As the car enters a curve in the road, what appears to be a woman dressed in all black except for a white apron can be seen hovering above the center median of the road. When the clip is slowed down for better examination, it appears as though the apparition has no legs and simply watches as cars drive past her. While all this could be an illusion created while a girl tried to cross the road, why would she just stand on top of the barrier? And if it is simply an illusion, where is the woman going in those desolate surroundings so late at night and all alone? Number 6 is a locust swarm. On a bright sunny day in Dagestan, Russia, a dash camera in a man's truck captured what initially appears to be a sandstorm on the road ahead. As he advances, he suddenly realizes that it's not dust darkening the horizon, but a massive cloud of locusts. As he continues to drive slowly through the swarm, there are moments where the sheer number of creepy insects almost completely blocks out the view of the road ahead. This particular locust plague covers an area of almost 700,000 square kilometers. These ravenous insects can eat their own weight in food each day, making the fact that there are so many of them truly unsettling. The swarm seen in this video could eat the same amount as thousands of people, leaving trails of barren land that could mean famine for the locals. Number 5 is ghost car through a fence. A dash camera in a police cruiser involved in a late-night high-speed chase in Texas documented a bizarre ending in which a suspect's car appears to vanish through a chain-link fence to evade its pursuers. Throughout the clip, the driver of the suspect's car swerves across the road in an attempt to outmaneuver the police. When this fails, he pulls a sharp turn and speeds off with unbelievable speed in the opposite direction. Then, the car suddenly turns down a side street and races towards a dead end, before quickly turning again right through a chain link fence. The officers are left staring at the fence as the taillights appear down the road on the other side of the fence. How did the car suddenly appear on the other side of this barrier? Many have had theories, but no official answer has ever been given. Number 4 is the fireball. Just after 6:30 p.m. on November 14, 2014, a dash cam in a vehicle driving down a dark road in the Sverdlovsk region in Russia captured a stunning eruption of fire that lit up the night sky as if it were daytime. While the illumination only lasted around 10 seconds, it painted the entire sky in a wash of yellows and oranges and lit up the scene enough that the forest and other cars could clearly be seen, as though sunrise had occurred in a moment and then vanished. While the Russian Ministry for Emergency Situations officially claimed that it was the result of an explosion, no sound was heard accompanying the light. Other theories, none of which have been proven, include a high-altitude nuclear explosion, a meteor strike, or even alien visitors in a UFO. Number 3 is ghost crossing. In a dark evening in Russia, a car bumps along an icy, snowy, seemingly empty road. Suddenly, the dash cam captures what appears to be a woman in a long white dress standing on the side of the road. As the driver slows down, the woman walks right in front of the car and crosses the road without acknowledging the car at all. When the footage is paused, it appears the woman is carrying something in her hands. Why is she out wandering in the dark all alone, dressed in a long gown? And what is she holding? Locals who have heard of this footage believe she's the ghost of a young bride who was killed in a car accident and is searching for her groom, unaware of the fate that she met. We may never know the truth about this ghostly wanderer. Number 2 are the men in suits. As the driver speeds along a narrow road through a grassy area late at night, they round a curve and suddenly see a man dressed in a suit and carrying a briefcase scurry out of their path towards the side of the road. He's joined by another identically dressed man, and the pair run off the road where they join a group of at least 10 men, all dressed exactly the same way. The group seems alarmed as they appear to bob up and down in the headlights. The camera then pans to show another figure further away and seems to be holding a lit flare above their head. As if this wasn't bizarre enough, at the very end of the clip, a figure can be seen walking into view holding a stick from the left side of the car. Did this driver stumble upon some creepy cult, or was it all an elaborate prank? Unfortunately, we may never know. And number 1 is Taxi Stop. On a seemingly normal night in a large Japanese city, a taxi driver spots a woman standing on the left shoulder of a busy road. He assumes the woman is waiting for a ride and drives his cab towards her to pick her up. His dashcam captures his approach to the woman, who can be clearly seen and is dressed in all white, staring straight forward and seemingly motionless. The rear-facing camera in his taxi captures the approach to where the woman was standing a moment before, but there was no one in sight. Was this woman a ghost of a poor soul who was killed on the roadway? If not, then where did she go so suddenly? Number 10 is Michael Jackson's ghost. There's no doubt that Michael Jackson was one of the most talented musicians of our generation. But there's also little doubt that he was a controversial figure, mired in accusations which caused many to eye him with distrust. Jackson lived an increasingly reclusive life in his Neverland mansion in response to these accusations, and it was in this mansion after his passing that something sinister was captured during a live broadcast on Larry King Live. As the cameras panned around the rooms of Jackson's home, a strange shadow was seen walking through a room at the end of a long corridor. The shadow even cast a reflection on the wooden floor as it walked past. Many believe the shadowy figure is Jackson himself, who is said to haunt his old home, as reclusive in death as he was in life.
You know, it was okay, but when he locked, he wanted his privacy. He had his privacy.
Number 9 is UFOs on command. In a featured piece for ABC News, a reporter was filmed interviewing a man in America who claimed that he could manifest UFOs in the sky by command. This news piece was clearly set up to mock the man's claims, who maintained that voices in his head helped him bring the UFOs into view through a connection with God. However, after picking a random location and time, the unthinkable occurred. While filming the man attempting to call the UFOs through prayer, strange objects did indeed appear in the clear blue sky above. One of these things was a bright orange sphere which moved back and forward towards the news crew. Then the UFOs disappeared from view. No one is sure what was seen that day or how the man brought them into existence, but what is certain is that it's one of the strangest news pieces ever caught on camera.
Brother, look at it, there it is.
You can barely see it, a white speck. Then another sighting.
There it is, I got it.
Photojournalist Jonathan Hawkins locks in on it. Let's take a closer look here. It's an orange sphere that appeared out of nowhere. I call the boss with an unexpected change in my story.
I can see it clear as day. In fact, it's bright.
Number 8 is in today's edition. Since 2009, a show called The Morning Club has aired on Albanian radio and television. Taking influence from Western shows, The Morning Club is supposed to be a relaxed, informal conversation between its hosts and guests. However, in one instance, this relaxed environment soon became filled with tension and fear. While the show's hosts were having a conversation during an ad break, the cameras caught what can only be described as poltergeist activity. A newspaper sitting on the desk between both hosts was visibly lifted up into the air and thrown off screen. No one was near the paper when it happened, and both hosts were confused and frightened by the strange phenomenon. No explanation has been given, and to this day people debate whether it was an example of psychic poltergeist activity or the physical manifestation of a ghost.
Rolo për pjetë.
Ua, të mërshme.
E thonë pasaj që nuk ka shpirtra.
Number 7 is the Disappearing Act. Sometimes a moment unnerves us simply because it goes against our common sense. It violates how we assume reality works on a day-to-day basis. When these moments are preserved forever by live television, they become even more uncomfortable because even under scrutiny, they still don't make sense to us. This is the case with one famous piece of footage taken during an interview in an airport in Europe. In the background, a woman with blonde hair stands waiting in the baggage area. Then, as another woman passes in front of her, she vanishes completely. No one is sure what happened to the woman. Some believe it's an optical illusion and she simply moved off camera, but others are convinced that she disappeared into thin air and that a dark phenomenon was at play. Number 6 is a haunting game. Many decades ago, if a soccer fan wanted to see a game, they had to buy a ticket. These days, almost every game imaginable is broadcast live. With so many cameras placed to capture every angle of a game, it's perhaps not surprising that in one instance, the cameras captured something far more intangible than a soccer ball being kicked into a goal. During a soccer game in Mexico, one camera was panning across the field when, to the surprise of those watching at home, an apparition appeared to float across the stadium. The figure was bathed in shadow and appears to be moving through the crowd sitting in the stands. As no one who was physically there saw the entity, some experts have suggested that this is a prime example of how camera equipment can capture evidence for the supernatural, which the human eye cannot see.
Es correcto, ningún amonestado. Sacará al arquero, le
Number 5 are those aliens? In February of 2018, a cluster of strange lights in the sky were captured during a live news broadcast. The channel was Fox 6 News and was broadcasting a live feed in Milwaukee. At 4:43 a.m., 10 sinister lights appeared in the distance. If those dots had been stationary, then the hosts of the show could have easily explained them as stars. However, those lights moved through the night sky in an almost organic way. They darted around each other, fading in and out of visibility as though they were phasing through reality before disappearing once and for all. The show's hosts were completely bemused by the entire event. One host asked if the lights were fireworks, while the other had no option but to suggest a more extraterrestrial origin.
Are those fireworks? What is that?
Fireworks or something.
Aliens? I don't know.
What the heck
Where
is
is that? You see it, right?
I'm actually, yes,
Okay.
I do see it.
Okay.
It's getting weirder by the second.
I know.
It's like they're sticking around.
Number 4 is the rocking chair. In 2007, during a British television show called This Morning, a woman named Debbie Merrick was being interviewed about her supernatural claims. Debbie and her husband both alleged that a doll that they had brought into their home several weeks earlier was clearly possessed by an evil spirit. As they spoke about the doll, it was positioned for the audience to see sitting on a black rocking chair. Debbie alleged that the doll's behavior included moving around unseen and even scratching Debbie's husband while he slept. The hosts of the morning show were understandably skeptical, but that skepticism was soon challenged. As Debbie spoke about the fear of being near the doll, it started to rock the rocking chair back and forward. The hosts were unnerved, and as of yet, no explanation has been given for this creepy phenomenon.
Gaynor Green says, my nan has a collection of dolls in her dining room. They're so creepy. They look as if they're just waiting to pounce. Now, you put this up for sale, right? And you put it on the web, right? And you were quite upfront because you didn't want anybody buying this unless they knew this was possessed, as you believe possessed.
I didn't list it as a haunted doll. I listed it as a creepy doll.
Number 3 is the crawler. Tsunamis are terrifying enough, but when these huge waves crash inland, they often bring with them secrets and mysteries from the deepest oceans. One piece of live footage appears to have brought one of these terrifying moments to light. During a tsunami in Japan, the footage shows the ferocious power of the sea as it destroys part of the town. While the cameraman continues to film, he unwittingly captures what appears to be a strange white creature which leaps out of the water. The creature then crawls up the side of a building before vanishing into thin air. If this is indeed a previously undiscovered animal, it appears to have the ability to blend completely into its environment. This begs the question, how many of these creatures are around us as we speak? Number 2 is the jinn. In some cases, it's not what live television captures visually that's disturbing, but rather the sounds recorded which strike terror into the viewing public. One of the most infamous cases of this was a call-in show from 2011. Viewers were asked to phone in to ask religious guidance from the guests, one of whom was a Muslim holy man. When a woman phoned in looking for advice, the call quickly turned from an ordinary conversation into a paranormal encounter. The lady was allegedly taken over by an evil spirit known as a jinn. As the holy man attempted to converse with the spirit, the lady's voice altered and mocked the holy man with a sinister laugh. As the conflict progressed, the call was suddenly cut off. What happened to the caller to this day remains unknown.
Like one man standing with the left hand forward, left foot forward, Allah's name on the left leg. Also, also, when people... I'm sorry, I can't speak.
Bismillah, a magician or somebody send this jinn to block you to speak or to go to court.
Yes, blocked.
And number 1 is the Wyoming incident. In 2008, a strange series of messages and images interrupted a news broadcast in Wyoming. Some have since suggested that it was part of an elaborate alternative reality game, while others insist that it was the original broadcast that was real. If it was, it's one of the most disturbing moments in live television history. The scheduled broadcast was interrupted and replaced with text on-screen reading. We present a special presentation. Then, more unnerving black and white text appeared. It stated, "You will see such pretty things." It was at this point that a series of strange, disturbing faces were shown on screen.
Wyoming today, making him the first to visit in preparation for the 2008 general election. Republican President Jackson. Mitt Romney also plans on visiting Cooper in Cheyenne on his presidential tour.
Warped text then threatened, "You are ill, we just want to fix you." But it was the final message which was the most chilling of all. It asked the question, what hides in your mind? Then answering itself with, we have already seen it. Number 10 are Girls on the Stairs. In 1974, author Stephen King spent a night in the infamous Stanley Hotel in Colorado, later calling it the perfect, maybe the archetypal setting for a ghost story, and used it as his inspiration for his best-selling novel, The Shining. Numerous accounts of ghost sightings have been reported at that hotel, but one photo taken of the alleged ghosts ended up leaving a former FBI agent baffled. The picture was taken by John Mausling, who snapped a photo of his family from the staircase while on a spirit tour. Of the 11 people present on the tour, none were the size or age of a kid, yet the blurry image of the young girl can be seen descending from the steps. Former federal agent Ben Hansen has looked into the image and found no evidence of anything being altered, meaning what we see here is very real. Number 9 is the Spy House. If you're looking for an eerie experience, specifically one in which ghosts of kids are running around you, then take a trip to Port Monmouth, a town in New Jersey where one building is considered one of the most haunted places in America. Since the Monmouth County Park System acquired it in 1998, the building has been renamed the Seabrook Wilson House and serves as an activity center. However, locals still recognize it by its previous name, the Spy House. Visitors have encountered multiple ghosts there, but arguably the creepiest of them have been those of the kids who have been seen and heard giggling to each other as they chase each other in circles. They've been known to pull pranks as well, untying people's shoes, changing the time on wristwatches, or making cameras stop working. Number 8 is Ghost Boy Bridge. When it comes to the Ghost Boy Bridge, which is part of Clinton Road in West Milford, New Jersey, there are actually multiple stories, each one more eerie than the last. Clinton Road itself is considered by many to be the most haunted roadway in America, but this bridge, which allows passage over a waterway called Clinton Brook, has ghost hunters flocking to it. Legend has it that if you were to leave a quarter on the yellow line, essentially the middle of the road on the bridge, the ghost of a young boy who drowned in the creek below will return it to you. Other variations describe the boy appearing before a person who leaves the coin, while yet another tells of the ghost pushing the person into the water and potentially to their tragic end. Regardless, this might be a bridge you want to avoid crossing. Number 7 are the Railroad Kids. According to legend, sometime between 1930 and 1949, a bus carrying 7 school kids was driving along a road in San Antonio, Texas, when it broke down, coming to a stop directly on a railroad crossing. The driver realized moments after the bus stopped that a train was barreling down on them, so he attempted to evacuate everyone on the bus. Sadly, there was no time, and the crash claimed 10 of the students, along with the bus driver. Today, it's said that if you park your car on the tracks and wait, the car will be physically pushed until it's moved out of potential danger. People have been known to sprinkle flour on the back of their vehicles before performing the experiment, only to find multiple handprints marking where the students' ghosts have pushed it forward. Number 6 is the Andrew Jackson Hotel. As one of New Orleans' most haunted hotels, it's little wonder that the Andrew Jackson Hotel has drawn so many ghost hunters and paranormal researchers to it. In 1794, 2 different fires caused severe damage to the hotel and claimed the lives of 5 young boys. The ghosts of those children are said to still haunt the building to this day. Guests and employees of the hotel have reported hearing kids playing and laughing outside in the courtyard late at night, only to find no visible source for the noises when they investigate. And at least one guest has seen the ghost of a boy after his television turned on all by itself and he moved to turn it off, only to find a young boy sitting in front of the device. The guest shouted, causing the ghost to vanish into the night. Number 5 is Mommy. After he began having that unmistakable feeling that unseen things were following him as he moved around his apartment, Steve Huff, better known as the YouTuber Huff Paranormal, started posting videos in which he tried to communicate with them. The Arizona-based paranormal researcher believes that the ghost or ghosts that are haunting him followed him home from a previous investigation, as many spirits have been known to do that. And according to his recorded evidence, at least one of them was a kid. After his dog began acting strangely and seemingly saw something that wasn't there, Huff grabbed his GoPro and recorded a few minutes of the room. What he got back were a few EVPs, or electronic voice phenomenon. The voice of a kid calling out "Mommy" can be heard, along with some ramblings. Number 4 is the Ursuline Convent. Although it's well known for stories of vampires and casket girls, the Ursuline Convent in New Orleans, Louisiana has some additional occupants that are actually much creepier. Originally built as a religious institution and orphanage, this building has been transformed into a museum, but some of its original tenants might still be around. Multiple guests and tour guides have heard the sounds of kids playing, with the bulk of the paranormal activity occurring in the building's courtyard. Stranger still, though the kids were not really there, the sounds they were making seemed to get much louder as those who could hear them approached the yard's gate. Some visitors have even laid eyes on them. But are they ghosts, or, as some experts claim, just the past replaying over and over again? Number 3 is the Begging Boy. The old ruins of a castle in the village of Castellians in Cork County, Ireland, are said to be haunted by the ghost of an unidentified young boy who goes around begging people for something. But what makes this story truly unsettling is that the boy isn't begging for change or food like some other ghosts that have been encountered. He's pleading for his life to be spared. The apparition, which has been given the appropriate nickname the Begging Boy, roams about the ruins, spreading an aura of depression as he moves along. It's been said that from the boy's perspective, he keeps reliving the final moments of his short life, begging for the forgiveness of the castle's former owner, which tragically would never and will never come to him. Number 2 are the Black-Eyed Kids. Since the 1980s, tales of the Black-Eyed Kids have terrified millions, especially in 1996, when Brian Bethel, a reporter from Abilene, Texas, encountered a pair of them. Bethel was parked in a parking lot when 2 boys tapped on his window and asked for a ride home. Right away, the man felt like something was off. He then noticed the boys' eyes, which were totally black with no irises or pupils at all. It didn't take long for Bethel to decide to quickly peel out of there. While many claim that these young-looking beings are vampires or aliens from another planet, the prevailing theory is that they're ghosts. But we really only know what happens to those who refuse to provide help to the Black-Eyed Kids, and it's not good. And number 1 is Dear David. On August 7th, 2017, writer and illustrator Adam Ellis posted on Twitter that he was being haunted by the ghost of a young boy with a misshapen head who meant him serious harm. For months, the New York resident had been seeing the boy in his dreams, one of which presented him with the boy's nickname, Dear David. But after Ellis asked him one too many questions, David began manifesting himself in the real world. Ellis captured pictures and video of Dear David, posting all of it to Twitter. Dedicated followers of the story began analyzing everything he posted and actually discovered things not even Ellis had noticed, including silhouettes in doorways and David's face in reflections. The entire Dear David incident scared so many people online that it's now being made into a feature film. Number 1 is Our Lady of Zytown. There are thousands of stories documented from the past of people who have claimed to see a religious figure. While most of them were a single sighting, the appearance of Our Lady of Zytown was very different. This apparition was first seen on April 2nd, 1968 by a bus mechanic named Farouk Muhammad Atwa, who, upon spotting it, believed it to be a woman standing on the top of a church in Zytown district of Cairo, Egypt. Believing that she was suicidal, he, along with 2 other witnesses, called the authorities, who explained that it was simply a reflection of light. But it was quickly discovered that this was more than a simple reflection, as for over 2 years afterwards, thousands of people witnessed the same apparition, which resembled the Virgin Mary. Hundreds of photos were taken of these events, all of them depicting the same figure. Having been unable to produce an alternative explanation for the luminous sightings, the Egyptian government has come forward accepting the apparitions as real. Number 2 is the deathbed ghost. In 1999, the owners of the Worley family bed and breakfast in Georgia hired a photographer to take some pictures for promotional materials. Upon finding some useful ones, the photos were stored away for 4 years. In 2003, the owners decided to pull out the photos to find some for their website, only to discover something very odd in one of the images. Initially assumed to be a photographic flaw or artifact, the photo was further examined by professionals and it was discovered to have what appears to be a ghost of a teenage boy lying in a bed in the top right corner. The inn's owners believe that the apparition is that of Claude Worley, a young man who in 1889 was hit by a train and was brought into the house to be made comfortable until he died slowly. Number 3 is the girl on fire. On November 19th, 1995, a great fire consumed the Wem Town Hall in Shropshire, England, reducing the entire building to ashes. This monumental firefight brought both photographers and press to capture the battle. However, one picture was taken that has bewildered people to this day. This picture was taken by local resident and amateur photographer Tony O'Reilly, which seems to show a ghostly girl standing near a railing as the blaze destroys everything around her. Mr. O'Reilly, who died in 2005, adamantly claimed right up until the date of his death that he did not doctor the image that made headlines around the world. Adding credibility to his claim is that none who were there ever saw this girl, and the photo was later verified by experts to be authentic. Through research, it was later believed that the specter is that of 14-year-old Jane Churm, a girl who died in a fire that she caused accidentally with a candle over 300 years prior in 1677. Number 4 is Grandpa's Ghost. On August 17th, 1998, Denise Russell and her family took their 94-year-old grandmother out for a picnic to cheer her up after she had been in a nursing home for a week. During the family outing, Denise's sister took a photo of her grandmother, which captured something unexpected. Behind her grandmother stood her grandfather, who had died 14 years prior in 1984. Eerily, nobody noticed this anomaly until Christmas of 2000, after their grandmother had already been dead for over 8 months. Interestingly, their grandmother had always said that she felt the presence of her late husband, as if he had always been watching over her. Perhaps this picture captured one of those very moments. Number 5 is the Staircase Ghost. Queen's House Building at the National Museum in Greenwich, England, has been the site of many paranormal encounters in the over 400 years that it's been in existence. People have claimed to have heard footsteps, seen doors open seemingly by themselves, and ghosts who have roamed the halls. Of course, all of these were simply claims with no evidence, until one picture was taken. This photo, taken in 1966 by Reverend Ralph Hardy, a retired clergyman from White Rock, British Columbia, shows a glowing white figure climbing the staircase, the stairs being the only thing that he meant to photograph. It was only after this photo was developed that the woman appeared, much to the Reverend and his clergy's shock. When the Reverend came forward with this photo, many people cried hoax. That was until the photograph was authenticated by multiple experts who have declared it to be authentic. Number 6 is Lord Combermere's ghost. This photograph of the Combermere Abbey Library was taken in 1891 by photographer Sybil Corbett. It's located in Cheshire, England, and was founded by Benedictine monks in 1133. Corbett was commissioned to take some photos with her camera and set it up with the shutter open for 1 hour in the Combermere Abbey Library, while the house staff were attending her brother, Lord Combermere's funeral nearly 4 miles away. However, what's bizarre is that if you look closely, you can see a faint resemblance of a man sitting in a chair that bears a striking resemblance to Lord Combermere himself, who was killed days before when he was run over by a horse-drawn carriage. Now, some claim that during this photo exposure, some servants might have come into the room to sit on the chair, creating the image that we see here. However, this was deemed impossible as every member of the house was accounted for while attending Lord Combermere's funeral. The photo was authenticated by experts and it was determined to not be a double exposure. Number 7 is the Cooper family falling body. Sometime in the 1950s, the Cooper family bought an old house in Texas and moved in quickly. Days after unpacking, they decided to take a picture around the dining room table, smiling and celebrating their new home. However, when the photo was subsequently developed, they discovered an extra guest in the image. On the left of the image is what appears to be a hanging body of a deceased person, which was not originally there according to the father who took the photo. This is an extremely controversial photo that has made its rounds around the internet over the past 5 years. Many have claimed that this is the work of double exposure or Photoshop, but some who have analyzed the photo believe it to be genuine. Number 8 is the Amityville Ghost Boy. On November 13th, 1974, 23-year-old Ronald Defoe murdered his entire family in their home in Amityville, New York. Just over a year later, in December of 1975, the Lutz family moved into that very same home and immediately began noticing paranormal activity, enough so that they actually fled the house after only 28 days. In response, on March 6, 1976, famous paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, while investigating the haunting, took several photos with a time-lapse infrared camera. However, what they discovered upon developing the photos was nothing that anyone was prepared for. Caught in this photo is a small boy staring back at the camera, a small boy that looked eerily familiar to many who saw it. It was none other than Matthew Defoe, the same young boy that was brutally murdered by his father less than 2 years prior. The house was verified to be vacant, and there is still no explanation as to why the young boy appeared in the photo. Number 9 is the White Lady of Worstead Church. In 1975, Peter Berthelot and his wife Diane were visiting the Worstead Church in North Norfolk, United Kingdom with their 12-year-old son. As most families do on their vacations, they took a photo of their destination, in this case the inside of a church. However, what they did not expect was to develop a photo that would come to be known forever as the White Lady of Worstead Church. In this famous photo, we see Diane sitting at a pew with an apparition behind her. The specter appears to be wearing old clothes, including a bonnet. Understandably terrified, the family submitted the photo to the church vicar, Reverend Pettit, who had an interesting revelation. The day the photo was taken, Diane was sick, which is why she was sitting. The Reverend quickly identified the apparition as the White Lady, a healer who appears to those who are sick. The legend he spoke of had gone back over 100 years, but this was the first time that someone had actually captured her in an image. And number 10 is someone in the back seat. Back in 1959, while at a cemetery to visit her mother's grave, Mabel Shinnery snapped some pictures of the site, including this shot of her husband as he sat in the passenger seat of the couple's car. However, unbelievably, the camera captured something else unexpected: Mabel's dead mother sitting in the back seat. An expert had analyzed the photo and determined that it was genuine and authentic, leaving Mabel terrified and with more questions than answers. When news of this story got out, it was printed in several publications, including the original news report that broke the story on June 28, 1959 in Parade magazine. To this day, nobody has found an answer to what happened in this photograph, leaving many to conclude that this was in fact the ghost of the deceased Miss Shinnery. Number 10 is the Vatican City Ghost. While on vacation in Vatican City, college student Mark Fowler from Mill Bay, British Columbia, captured a fair amount of footage in St. Peter's Basilica. Upon arriving back home, he watched the video again with his friends, who were very surprised to spot a strangely obvious figure covered in all red material floating high above the crowd of tourists. Mark could not recall ever seeing it while he was there, and no one in the video seems to be paying any attention to it at all. As the camera makes another pass of the area, you can see the phantom has changed locations, appearing at the back left side of the church. Previously skeptical about spirits, Mark now believes it may be a manifestation of the spirit of Jesus' disciple, St. Peter, who happens to be buried right under that very same church. Number 9 is the Savannah, Georgia Cemetery Ghost. Savannah, Georgia is known as one of the most haunted cities in America, and on December 31st, 2008, 17-year-old Jesse Greathouse captured footage that would help support that claim. While on vacation with his family, Jesse was given a camcorder and told to film whatever he wanted as they toured around Colonial Park Cemetery, the resting place of over 9,000 bodies in a mass grave filled with victims of the yellow fever. As Jesse filmed, his attention was caught by a distant sight of a kid running through the cemetery. In the video, he zooms in on the small child only to see it jump straight into a tree and then fall down and disappear instantly. Upon analysis, experts agree that the tape is genuine and has not been manipulated in any way. Perhaps what he saw was the playful ghost of a young boy running around near his own gravesite. Number 8 is the Barton Mansion ghost. Built on an Indian burial ground in 1859, the Barton Mansion in Redlands, California, has a long history of hauntings. The mansion's owner, Dr. Barton, disregarded all of the warnings he received about desecrating the resting place of so many souls, and it ended up costing him dearly. Soon after moving in, Barton's 2 young daughters died mysteriously. The grief following his loss drove Barton insane, and before his death, he began practicing satanic rituals in an attempt to see his daughters again. In 2001, a group of local teenagers filmed themselves venturing into the abandoned house to find proof that it was haunted. Prior to their footage, they had entered a room and found a hunk of meat in a circle of stones. When they came back from recording, they were accosted by a ghost wielding what looked like a lantern. Number 7 is the London Underground sighting. Since 1868, an alarming number of people have taken their own lives by jumping in front of trains in London's subway system. But that wasn't exactly the end of their journey, as their ghosts have been spotted wandering the London Underground. In June of 2016, a video of the Knightsbridge station tracks taken by Neil Andrew Pike went viral. He was returning from the Science Museum when he accidentally captured a phantom person jump down onto the tracks. Knightsbridge on the Piccadilly line has been the site of 92 reported suicide attempts in the last decade alone. The station also happens to be located very close to an old burial ground for thousands of victims of the 17th century's Great Plague. Whoever the being is on this video, their decision to jump onto the tracks could be telling of their final actions while they were still alive. Number 6 is the Headless Ghost. This video comes from somewhere in the Middle East and features 5 kids running around and exploring a large abandoned school in daylight. After 2 minutes pass, the kids have not found anything scary or ghostly, but this all changes when they enter a large, brightly lit classroom. Once inside this completely empty room, the camera pans across to witness a shadowy headless human figure seemingly walk through the wall and towards the cameraman in broad daylight. At the same time this happens, a loud droning noise begins, which is most likely the sound of the voices in religious prayer at a nearby mosque. Strangely, none of this seems to faze anyone present in the room, almost as if it was only detected by the camera lens itself. Whatever it was, those kids certainly are lucky that they didn't see it in person. Number 5 is the Honduran Ghost Doctor. In 2016, footage from a school hospital in Honduras appeared on a Facebook page called La Horta Dimension. The video shows a long hospital corridor where a ghostly figure appears to step through a doorway into the hall and then disappear instantly. The ghost itself is believed to be the spirit of a doctor who took his own life at the hospital several years ago and now remains there wandering the halls. Patients staying at the hospital have felt his presence and have witnessed flickering lights and other strange occurrences in their rooms. And what's even stranger is the camera operator who captured this footage is unknown. The 22-second clip has become one of the most convincing pieces of evidence for the hauntings in this Honduran hospital. Number 4 is the Wentworth Woodhouse haunting. Since it first aired on May 25th, 2002, the United Kingdom's Most Haunted has visited a number of locations in the search of paranormal activity. While at the Wentworth Woodhouse stable block in Wentworth, England, the crew caught an apparition on film. Both Carl Beatty and Stuart Torvell were filming in an empty hallway after hearing the sounds of footsteps and decided to ask whatever spirits were present to walk towards them. Then, a mysterious man who appears to be semi-transparent suddenly materializes in the hallway and proceeds to walk silently up the staircase. Both Carl and Stuart try to chase after the individual, but find nothing at the end of the hall, leaving them to believe he had disappeared. There has never been a clear explanation for what happened that day, but what is perfectly clear is that someone or something was in the hall with them. Number 3 is the Disneyland Ghost. When darkness falls on the parks at Disneyland in Anaheim, California, the tourists leave, but apparently something else roams the park's quiet streets. In 2009, a video of Disneyland's CCTV footage, which appears to show a ghostly human, was uploaded directly to YouTube. The Phantom clearly walks from the Haunted Mansion building straight through a closed iron bar gate over to the Rivers of America section, where it then begins to walk straight across the water. Now, this video might be less convincing if it hadn't already shown the being on several different camera angles at the same time, meaning it's actually part of a series of security footage and not just a trick of the night. Some people have commented on the video believing that this may be Walt Disney's ghost surveying the park after hours. But whether he is or isn't, let's hope he's just there to have fun. Number 2 are the Black Forest Orbs. Just south of Denver, Colorado is Black Forest, a heavily wooded area that is fraught with paranormal activity. One particular piece of footage taken there has left experts baffled. The Black Forest orbs in this video were filmed at the Lee household in the mid-1990s and appear to be very large and bright, leaving light trails behind them. In addition, the way that they move seems extremely unnatural and rules out any possibility that the camera is just picking up dust particles or reflections of light. According to paranormal investigators, the orbs in the video are also visible to the naked eye and behave in a similar fashion. Their origins are a complete mystery, but with so much ghost activity in the surrounding area, it's easy to see that they could be strongly connected to the paranormal. And number 1 are the ghosts of Gettysburg. The Battle of Gettysburg was a massive win for the Union Army during the American Civil War in 1863, but it came at a great expense. The battle lasted from July 1st to July 3rd and resulted in nearly 36,000 casualties. In November of 2001, Tom and Delia Underwood set up a camera at the Triangular Field in Gettysburg and captured some of the strangest ghostly visuals ever recorded. The Triangular Field was a highly contested area during the battle since it had stone walls that were useful for defense against any invaders. In the footage, the couple witnessed strange translucent white figures moving through the trees. As they searched for explanations, the figures became more vivid and clear. Could these be the ghosts of the long-forgotten soldiers locked in an eternal battle? To this day, nobody knows. It's only speculation that remains. Number 10 is the Temple of Amida. Located on Mount Myozan in Japan, the Amida-ji Temple was built to appease spirits of those that were killed during a war that saw the end of the Heike clan over 700 years ago. The most famous legend to come out of the temple was that of Hayoshi, a penniless blind man with a gift for playing music who used to live there. On multiple nights, he was led away by a samurai to the home of a lord. However, Hayoshi was not going to a house at all, but instead was actually playing music in front of the Heike Emperor's grave. Painting protective symbols all over the blind man, the temple's priest forgot to mark his ears, so when the samurai returned, they were the only parts of Hayosh he could see. Hearing of this, Hayosh panicked, tore them off, and never returned. To this very day, Hayosh the earless, wondrous music can be still heard in the graveyard around the temple late at night. Number 9 is Notre Dame. Located in Paris, France, the Notre Dame Cathedral, officially completed in 1345, stands as possibly the finest example of French Gothic architecture. One of the legends surrounding the structure's completion says that in the 13th century, a blacksmith named Biscornet was given the task of decorating the cathedral's side doors. Overwhelmed with the thought of working on such a building, he made a deal with the devil, who completed the beautiful doors for him. But on the day that the doors were to be opened, they wouldn't budge until holy water was sprinkled on them. Another tale tells the story of a mysterious woman known only as MJ, who in October of 1882 jumped from one of the towers and died upon impact. It's said that to this day, upon walking through those doors, you can feel an eerie presence. And upon looking up at the gargoyles on the cathedral itself, MJ can still be seen walking among them. Number 8 is St. Andrews on the Red. Officially opened in 1849, St. Andrews on the Red is a church in Selkirk, Manitoba, Canada, named primarily due to the proximity to the Red River, and also due to the pair of glowing red eyes that many people have seen while inside. Considered one of Canada's most haunted places, St. Andrews is home to multiple ghosts, including a man in black, as well as a woman in white who appear and disappear seemingly at random while walking about the graveyard outside. The gates of that cemetery have been seen and heard rattling strongly, even when there's no breeze, as well as a ghost car has been seen traveling around the church's parking area. Many who have witnessed the supernatural entities on the church's grounds reported having awful nightmares for several nights afterwards, most of which came with visions of the rattling gate. Number 7 is Egg Hill Church. Built in 1860, Egg Hill Church sits, all but abandoned, in Center County, Pennsylvania. Legend has it that a minister went mad and chained the front doors of the building shut with his entire congregation inside. He then proceeded to give communion, however, the wine was laced with poison. Everyone in that mass was killed, including the minister himself. Today, the church is said to be haunted, with some seeing the ghost of the priest himself, while others claim that they've seen some of the murdered patrons. Some claim that the urban legend is simply that, an urban legend. However, others say that the story only came after terrifying things began happening in and around Egg Hill. These include sightings of the ghostly minister, dark marks that appear and disappear on the church's walls, and the church bells ringing on their own. Number 6 is St. Michan's Church. Built in 1095 as a Catholic church for the remaining Vikings in the area, the St. Michan's Church in Dublin, Ireland, converted to being a Protestant church in 1686. But even with the change and rebuilding of much of it, the building never removed the vault in the basement. Several coffins still containing bodies have been found in the rooms under the chapel, many of which have never been identified. Incredibly, due to the limestone content in the soil, as well as the dry conditions inside the crypt, these bodies have mummified, becoming almost perfectly preserved. Among the bodies are those of powerful families, many of whom are apparently still trying to influence the living today. Visitors often report hearing the mummies whisper, often many voices at once, and some have even felt unseen hands grab them or even push them. Not exactly a place you want to go worship at. Number 5 is Basilica of Our Lady of Good Health. Located in Velankani, India, the Basilica of Our Lady of Good Health has been the site of numerous supernatural occurrences. Built in the early 1900s, the location of the church was selected due to sightings of a ghostly woman and her infant son, who many claim to be the Mother Mary and Jesus Christ himself. 2 of the first sightings were by young boys, the second of which was crippled until the spirits appeared to him. There are even tales of the ghostly pair saving European sailors from a storm, which suddenly ended when they appeared on the deck of a Portuguese ship. As of today, these unknown ghostly figures are often seen wandering the grounds. In addition, other unidentified ghosts have been sighted at the basilica, including a number of traders from international destinations who were worshippers at the church. No one at the church or anyone who visits it knows what these ghosts want or who they truly are, but they remain cautious. Number 4 is St. Louis Cathedral. Initially built in 1718, the Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis, King of France, better known locally as St. Louis Cathedral, is located in the French Quarter of New Orleans, Louisiana. It holds the title as the oldest cathedral in the United States. The building that stands today is the 4th iteration of the church after a hurricane and a fire took down the first 2, and a public outcry to expand took most of the 3rd. However, it's rumored that when the cathedral was expanded, it covered a small cemetery on the church grounds, and those interred there took offense. Notable ghosts include Pere Antoine, a Spanish Capuchin friar who's been spotted roaming the grounds or standing by the altar. Another is Pere Dagobert, a monk who walks the halls in sandals at night, chanting as he shuffles along. Number 3 is St. Thomas Church. Located in a small village called Mulgoa in New South Wales, Australia, St. Thomas Church was constructed in 1838 out of sandstone and cedar. With a number of updates over the years, the church still stands today, though for some it may not have the draw that it used to. It's rumored that 2 twin brothers were playing with fire on the church grounds when it suddenly got out of control and wound up killing them both. People have reported spotting or hearing both of the brothers, who were perceived as being angry with the visitors, especially if they happened to light a match or lighter. Additionally, people have reported strange activity while driving towards or around the church at night. It's said that a warning comes first when the headlights on your vehicle stop working, but soon after your car will stall, stranding you there with the angry ghost twins. Number 2 is Old Rock Church. Located 6.4 kilometers east of Cranfills Gap in Bosque County, Texas, St. Olaf's Kirk, more commonly known as the Old Rock, was built between 1884 and 1886. The building was closed in 1917 when another Lutheran church was built nearby. However, that doesn't mean that the pews are empty. According to multiple witness reports, a large group of the dead still regularly attend, most often on Sundays. Many claim to have seen strange lights swirling about both inside the chapel and in the cemetery beside it. Strange voices can be heard reciting passages from both the Bible and hymn books, as well as some translucent figures walking among the seats. But none of that holds a candle to the choir. A few visitors have claimed that they heard the sound of a ghostly choir singing hymns coming from inside the church at night. And number 1 is St. Nicholas Church. Located in Pluckley, England, allegedly the most haunted church in the country, St. Nicholas Church certainly adds its fair share of ghost stories to the nation. A number of paranormal experts have investigated this building, specifically looking for 2 ghostly women who haunt it. Outside, walking the grounds, you may spot the Red Lady, a middle-aged woman in red clothing that is buried in a lead box somewhere on the premises. She roams the area surrounding the church, crying as she searches in vain for her baby, who, as the story goes, was stillborn prior to her death. Inside the church is the White Lady, a woman who's been seen both as a ghostly woman in flowing white garments and as a disfigured result of a house fire that she apparently lost her life to in 1952. Beware if you visit this area, because neither seem to enjoy visitors. Number 10 is Pocatello Pokey High School. Pocatello or Pokey High School in Pocatello, Idaho, is considered to be one of the most haunted schools in all of America. After the school was emptied for Christmas break on December 19, 2014, footage from the school's surveillance cameras confirmed suspicions that something otherworldly was in the building. Creepy footage was found of Pokey's empty hallways, showing the lights turning on and off at random before a ghostly figure emerges from a doorway and walks into the hall. Then the hall's lights go dark again. Students and staff alike have claimed to see mysterious shadows and heard ghostly voices in the auditorium, change rooms, and hallways. Paranormal investigators called in by the school discovered that the school burned to the ground in 1914 before it was reopened in 1918. A total of 6 people have died in that school, including a boy who drowned in the pool, and there have been claims that a group of girls may have carried out a suicide pact there. Kind of makes you want to do more research on the schools that you attend, doesn't it? Number 9 is Fordham University. Fordham University in the Bronx, New York was founded in 1841 and built its Rose Hill campus on the land of a former hospital. The school is thought to have dozens of permanent ghostly guests. Within the Martyrs Court dorms, a blonde girl and child's laughter have been witnessed. Sleeping students in Finley Hall have been nearly choked to death by a cold, invisible hand. There's also reports of a wandering boy in Hughes Hall, a cigar-smoking ghost in the administration building, and the spirit of a worker killed during renovations. But the worst is Keating Hall, which was built over the former medical building's morgue tunnels. There have been countless reports of cold spots, shadowy figures, and feelings of being watched and even touched. There are also countless reports of doors being slammed and chairs being thrown against the wall and downstairs, which might make a lot more sense as to why scenes from the movie The Exorcist were filmed at Fordham. Number 8 is Nagasaki University. Nagasaki University in Nagasaki, Japan is the country's national university. It was officially established in 1949, but the university's medical school was founded in 1857. The haunting of this establishment is believed to have happened because of one of the Second World War's most catastrophic events. On August 9th, 1945, an atomic bomb was dropped on the city by the United States Army. Upwards of 80,000 people were killed in that attack. This school was located only 600 meters from the bomb's epicenter and was nearly entirely destroyed. Over 800 students, medical workers, and professionals were on campus at the time and lost their lives. Given the horrific way that they died, it's not so surprising that many of the souls are still wandering the campus, which was restored in 1950. Over 70 years later, countless students, staff, and visitors have reported hearing bone-chilling screams and cries, as well as smelling burning flesh, which is always worse on the anniversary of the attack. Number 7 is Heidelberg University, Germany. Heidelberg University in Germany was founded in 1386 and is the country's oldest university. But this respected place of higher learning had a dark period during the Second World War. Like all other universities in Germany at the time, they supported the Nazi regime. On May 17, 1933, staff and students burned books at the university square. Now, on the anniversary, you can still smell burning leather. But even worse was the school's involvement in Nazi eugenics, the plan to wipe out an entire population of people to make way for the Aryan race. In the school's labs, women underwent forced sterilization, and their ghostly cries are still heard within the clinics. 2 of the school's Jewish professors were killed during the Holocaust, but their ghosts are said to still visit their old classrooms. They're even known to erase chalkboards or leave messages overnight, even when all of the halls and and doors have been locked. Number 6 is the University of Cambridge. The University of Cambridge was founded in 1209 and is the second oldest university in England. It's also home to the Ghost Club, Britain's oldest paranormal investigation group, which was founded there in 1855. At Corpus Christi College, the ghost of Vice Chancellor Henry Butts began stalking the hallways after he hanged himself in the office in 1632. Students have even held exorcisms to get rid of him, but with no luck. But by far, the university's most famous otherworldly resident is the ghost of Oliver Cromwell. The former Lord Protector of the Commonwealth died back in 1658, but was so hated that in 1661, his body was hung from chains and even beheaded. His head, which was put on a pole outside Westminster Abbey for 20 years, was later buried under the antechapel at Sydney Sussex College. It's said that his ghostly head has been floating around campus and appearing in windows, probably looking for the rest of his body. Number 5 is the University of Toronto. The University of Toronto in Canada is one of the most haunted places in the country. In 1870, Robert Christie, the wealthy owner of the Christie Mansion on campus, was having an illicit affair. He kept his mistress locked in a secret chamber hidden behind his library, the infamous Room 29. The girl became so depressed that she committed suicide by hanging herself with bed sheets. The room was later converted into a study, and now, if a woman enters the room alone at night, the door will slam shut and can only be opened from the other side. The ghost of the mansion, Ivan Resnikoff, began haunting the grounds in the 1850s after he was killed by his rival Paul Diablos. They were fighting over a woman when Resnikoff tried to kill Diablos with an axe, but Diablos stabbed him to death and hid his body in a ventilation shaft. Resnikoff is still seen in the quad late at night. Number 4 is the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Chung Chi College at the Chinese University of Hong Kong in Shatin, Hong Kong, is home to the ghost of a mysterious faceless woman. Male students are warned against walking home alone late at night along the single braid road if they want to avoid upsetting the wandering spirit. The road itself runs next to the campus and near railroad tracks and the university train station. The ghostly woman is said to have a single long braid and will draw up next to unsuspecting men. But it's said that when they turn to speak to the mysterious girl, they're met with a terrifying presence of the bloodied, faceless woman. It's believed that the ghost belongs to a woman who had escaped to Hong Kong from mainland China with her boyfriend. The couple had hidden on a train, and her boyfriend successfully jumped from it. However, when the girl tried to jump from the moving car, her braid got caught and ripped her face from her head. To this day, she's seen wandering the campus and haunting male students. Number 3 is Ateneo de Manila University. Ateneo de Manila University in Quezon City, Philippines, was founded in 1859. During World War II, the country was occupied by the Japanese army, and the university was used as a military camp. The ghosts of Japanese servicemen are still seen outside the dormitories, smoking cigarettes and patrolling the halls. But the most haunted site on campus is the Department of Communications building. One evening, after the janitor had cleaned the empty building and was about to lock up, the security guard asked to use the washroom. When the guard returned, the janitor checked the washroom and found the walls and floor streaked with the handprints made from human blood. He confronted him, but the guard had no idea what he was talking about. But when he returned to leave, the janitor saw a handprint on the back of the guard's uniform. There's even rumors that there's a portal to another realm hidden within the building. Number 2 is Gujarat Technological University. Gujarat Technological University in Ahmedabad, India, was only established in 2007, but they still have their share of ghosts. In the summer of 2013, administrative staff, as well as members of the security team, began hearing what sounded like the cries of a woman. But when they went to investigate the cause of the noise, they found no one. But over time, the ghost became more upset and active. The staff claimed that doors would open and slam close on their own, and that they could hear furniture being moved and thrown. However, nothing was ever out of place. The hauntings got so bad that employees started to take leaves of absence due to nerves and extreme fear. One security guard reported that he felt the ghost's presence while in an elevator and reportedly was never the same again. No one knows what brought the ghost to the university, but the higher-ups, who tried to keep the stories quiet, still met with a priest and tried to get rid of it for good, but failed. And number 1 is St. Andrews University. St. Andrews University in Scotland is home to 2 of the country's most infamous spirits, the ghostly monk and the White Lady. They appear in the ruins of the university's medieval cathedral and graveyard. The ghostly monk, dressed in full monk robes, has been seen by the visitors climbing up St. Rule's Tower. This robed ghost is actually helpful, asking visitors if they need help and ensures that they find safe passage. Then there's the White Lady, who's described as having long hair and wears a long white dress. She's known to float across the grounds before disappearing near the haunted tower. It's believed that she's the ghost of a young woman whose body was found by stonemasons in 1868. The men were working to restore part of the church when they found a concealed room in the haunted tower filled with coffins. The only open coffin contained the perfectly intact body of a beautiful young woman dressed in a white silk dress. Number 10 is Hidden History. On the surface, a neighbor can seem harmless, but they may have a darker side behind closed doors. For one Redditor posting about their strange experience with a creepy neighbor, what they found in their neighbor's house was very bizarre. Their dad was helping the next door neighbor with something at their home because the neighbor and his wife were elderly and needed assistance. While in their home, that person's dad glanced into a spare room, and what he saw shocked him. The room was filled with Nazi memorabilia, swastikas, and all. It turned out the elderly wife's family had been Nazis, and the old couple were seemingly proud of this. While they didn't parade this in front of people, behind closed doors they celebrated the evil of that unforgivable regime. Number 9 is Private Viewing. Privacy can be a problem if you have inquisitive neighbors. That's why some feel the need to install high fences or plant trees around their property. But usually people are respectful of such things because they wouldn't like to have their privacy invaded in the same manner. In one instance, however, an account circulated online where a neighbor went to great lengths to enjoy watching his neighbors. Looking out from their bedroom window, a homeowner noticed something very worrying. In a neighbor's house, he could see a telescope sitting in a room. The telescope was pointing straight at the homeowner's bedroom window. If this wasn't unnerving enough, the homeowner began noticing that the neighbor only ever sat in that room at night with a dim nightlight on. Just enough light to see him moving around the telescope. Number 8 is What Made That Noise? Sometimes a neighbor attempts to intervene in the behavior of others out of the goodness of their heart. They're trying to do the right thing, and if you're on the receiving end of this and feel like you've done nothing wrong, it can absolutely feel like you're being unfairly treated. However, in one such instance, a homeowner received this exact kind of intervention and was utterly creeped out by it. One day he opened his front door and found a note attached to the outside. It was from his neighbor and read, "You need to feed your cats or I'm going to call animal control. I can hear them meowing." The homeowner was shocked, not by his neighbor's interference in his own business, but rather by the fact that he didn't own any cats. He still thinks about this and wonders what the neighbor really heard coming from his house. Number 7 is A Casual Confession. One online story of a creepy encounter with a neighbor involved a casual conversation. The neighbor appeared at the original poster's home to make a complaint. Apparently, a shared pipe was spewing out some sort of foam liquid. The neighbor was convinced that it was something to do with them. During the conversation, it became clear that the neighbor had quite a bit to drink due to the way that he was speaking. When the conversation calmed down and became more civil, the neighbor casually made a confession in a throwaway comment. He said that he had been driving around on a nearby road and ran over an old man, killing him. Whether the confession was true or just the ramblings of a drunk man, the poster has kept his distance from the neighbor ever since. Number 6 is a knock at the door. When a neighbor knocks at your door, you probably expect them to be asking to borrow something, or there to let you know that there's some neighborhood issue you should be aware of, but you don't expect them to be pleading for their life. That's what happened to one anonymous homeowner whose story was related by a friend online. One day, a knock came at her door, and she was puzzled to see a disheveled girl about 15 years old standing on her doorstep. Cautious, the homeowner of the house opened the door and asked politely what she wanted. The girl then confessed that she had been held captive in the next house, and the homeowner had kept her in his bathroom without ever letting her leave. The homeowner immediately called the police, and the neighbor was arrested. Number 5 is on campus. On a college campus with a communal area, there's even less protection from neighbors than usual. In one instance, a college student had their own living space with a communal area that they shared with 4 people. One of those people was a man named Hugh. Hugh had obvious problems. For starters, when the shared kitchen knives disappeared, they were found in Hugh's room. He had embedded them into the wall, but that was nothing compared to his most worrying behavior. After helping Hugh move some things from his previous place, the college student was terrified by Hugh's attempts at thanking him. Hugh picked the lock on the student's room door one night, stood at the front of his bed, and when the student woke, simply said, "Thank you for helping me," and left. After that, the student barricaded his door every night. Number 4 is Keen Gardiner. Harry Bridges' aunt once told him an eerie story about a neighbor she lived next to during the 1970s and 80s. The neighbor seemed reasonable enough, and she was always tending to her garden, which was filled with roses. The flowers on display were always commented on, people no doubt wondering what her secret was. As it turns out, the neighbor did have a secret, and a pretty macabre one at that. She was a volunteer at a local blood bank. When she was there, the neighbor would take bags of expired blood, sit in her garden in front of her flower beds, and then pour the human blood over the soil. She seemed to take great delight from this. That made people even more uneasy about it. But her garden continued to bloom, and so did her neighbor's unease. Number 3 is possession. One creepy neighbor encounter took place after the neighbor had passed away. The woman was named Mona and used to stand at her window staring out at the world, motionless like a gargoyle. When she passed away, her son asked someone if they could watch the house while they had her funeral, as there had been a number of break-ins recently. That's when her neighbor, Paras, agreed to help out. While she waited in Mona's home, she fixed herself a snack and sat on a big old armchair in front of the television holding the remote. There was when the power cut, and, frightened, Paras phoned her dad to come over. He was unsettled by what he saw, because Paras was sitting in the chair Mona had died in, remote in hand, acting like her at the same time they were lowering Mona's body into her grave. Number 2 is The Watcher. A man named Peter shared his frightening experience with a neighbor online. He wrote in detail about how his neighbor seemed unstable. The man would walk around the outside of his house during the day, staring at it from different angles. He also spent an unusual amount of time staring at his garage and car. At 4 a.m. in the morning, the man would be outside in his yard, checking his car over and staring at the street. Sometimes he would rush out of his home wearing sunglasses and carrying an old brown suitcase, as if going on a trip, only to reappear moments later. But most frightening of all to Pete was that the man would watch him through the gap in his front door whenever Pete would return home from a night out. The neighbor still lives there and each night continues to watch. And number 1 is the hopeless romantic. Lexi was asked out on a date by her neighbor, to which she agreed, but she ended the romance after realizing that he seemed strange. 2 weeks later, the neighbor left a bottle of women's gummy vitamins on her doorstep. When she would walk from her house to her car, Lexi would receive a text from him watching her, telling her that she was beautiful. After that, he left flowers and a handwritten creepy poem. Frightened, Lexi put a sign on her door, telling the neighbor that if he approached the house, she would phone the police. Angered, the neighbor tried to force his way into Lexi's home. After a restraining order, he bought Lexi a ticket to go to a concert with him. Thankfully, the neighbor had to flee the state due to an unrelated crime. If he hadn't, Lexi had no idea what would have came next. Number 10 is The Willows. The Willows is a terrifying ghost story based on real events that happened to one man. Algernon Blackwood published the story in 1907, and it follows two friends who are on a canoe trip down the river Danube. After finding an island in the middle of the river, they land on it and camp there for the night. However, as the waters rise around them, they find themselves stranded there, and after seeing what they think to be a corpse in the water, they suddenly realize the island is haunted. Blackwood himself has come out as saying that he has traveled extensively and that the rumors that this story is based on his life experience turned out to be true. Oftentimes, authors will put their real terrifying stories into fictional tales with characters because nobody will believe them. Number 9 is The Flying Dutchman. The concept of a ghost ship has been used as a fictional device in films, novels, and most famously in Samuel Taylor Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. But shockingly, many of these stories are actually based on real-life ghost ships. The Flying Dutchman is a large sailed ship which is doomed to sail forever and can never make port. Many believe that to even see the Flying Dutchman is an omen of doom. The stories of the ship go back to at least 1790, when a traveler described how sailors feared seeing the Flying Dutchman and believed that it was an apparition of a ship which could not make port during bad weather. It sank beneath the waves and its crew drowned with it. The Flying Dutchman has since been seen in multiple similar storms, and all sailors know to avoid it lest they suffer the same fate. Number 8 is Martin's Close. M.R. James wrote many of the greatest ghost stories of all time, and one in particular is based on a real event that took place in the 18th century England. The story is called Martin's Close and tells the story of a young woman with learning difficulties who falls in love with a rich man. Whenever the man walked through town, the woman would follow and sing to him. Eventually, he killed her, and afterwards was haunted by her ghost, who either taunted him or was obsessed with him still, depending on your reading of the story. Since the writing of the story, it has been discovered by researchers that that story is based on the real case of Henry Malcolm, who supposedly treated a similar young woman badly, which led to her suicide. Number 7 is The Woman in Black. The Woman in Black was written in 1982 by Susan Hill. It tells the story of a remote coastal village in England, which is preyed upon by a malevolent apparition known as the Woman in Black. Whenever this ghostly figure is seen, a child soon dies. Horrifyingly, this was a real experience that Susan Hill had, which led to her writing The Woman in Black. One winter evening on the Suffolk coast, Susan walked along a path which cut across a beach looking out to the North Sea. It led to a notorious deserted marsh, and as the sun set, Susan was heading home and came across a rotting boat lying in the mud. She suddenly realized that she was not alone. The shadows moved around her, and a strange light shone nearby. Ever since that encounter, children that she encountered began dying one by one. Number 6 is the Amityville Horror. Written by Jay Anson in 1977, the Amityville Horror is based on a terrifying case of supernatural malevolence. This story was so powerful that it caused mass interest in haunted houses throughout the 70s and 80s, and was even produced into a series of successful horror films. However, the events that are depicted in the book are real and chilling. In November of 1974, a man shot and killed his entire family as they slept. In total, the body count of dead people was 6. The house where this happened was on the south shore of Long Island, and the man who did this soon claimed that the house had been haunted and that he had been possessed to commit such barbaric murders. Now this may seem far-fetched, however, soon after, another family moved into the house. Lasting just 28 days, that family left, as paranormal phenomena had driven them from their new home. Number 5 is The Signal Man. The Signal Man was written by Charles Dickens in the 1860s. It is one of the most terrifying ghost stories ever written, and it was significantly influenced by Charles Dickens' own life experiences. In this story, a signalman whose duty it is to change points and signals on a train track is confronted by a hooded figure by the mouth of a nearby train tunnel. Each time the figure appears, a horrible tragedy occurs on the train line. Charles Dickens himself was involved in a train crash in 1865. The train derailed on a viaduct, causing carriages to fall into the water below. Dickens himself survived and attended to many of the wounded and dead. It's said that he was haunted by this event until the last years of his life, and that an ominous figure of the signalman directly relates to that experience. Number 4 is The Shining. Stephen King's classic 1977 novel, The Shining, is based on his own life and the chilling hauntings of the Stanley Hotel. While visiting Colorado's Stanley Hotel in 1974, King was influenced by its eerie atmosphere. He and his wife were the only 2 guests in that hotel because it was getting ready to close for the season. After being isolated and walking the empty halls, King began to have nightmares that his young son was being chased screaming through those very same corridors. Many believe that the hotel has a haunting presence living within it, and that perhaps King himself was influenced by it. He was also struggling with an alcohol addiction at the time, similar to the character Jack Torrance in the book. The Shining is literally a product of a haunted location and a man haunted by addiction and forces in real life. Number 3 is The Changeling. Released in 1980, the screenplay for The Changeling was based on the direct paranormal experiences of its writer, Russell Hunter. He believed that while living in a mansion in Denver, that the ghost of a young boy made contact with him. Through unexplained noises and bangs throughout the house, Hunter discovered a hidden children's room on the property. The writer then attempted to contact the spirit through a seance. The ghost directed him towards another house, where the spirit said that its bones and a gold medallion bearing the boy's name could be found. It turns out that the boy was a wheelchair user and had been murdered while still a child. Russell Hunter used these chilling experiences to write The Changeling and tell the spirit's harrowing story. Number 2 is A Christmas Carol. Every year, people sit down to read or watch a version of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, but what many people don't realize is that A Christmas Carol was partly inspired by real-life events. The book tells the story of a miser called Ebenezer Scrooge. He's a moneylender and is as cold-hearted as they come. On Christmas Eve, he's visited by 3 spirits which show him the error of his ways. As it turns out, Scrooge himself was actually based on a real person. He was a banker from Edinburgh called Ebenezer Scroggie. The man had told of stories of how he was haunted throughout his life by the decisions that he made. Dickens took his terrifying life story of being haunted by the paranormal and turned it into a book. And number 1 is The Monkey's Paw. Published in 1902, The Monkey's Paw by W.W. Jacobs is both a legendary ghost story and based on fact. In the story, a family finds an old mummified monkey's paw. They are told that the paw had a spell placed upon it and that it grants the owner 3 wishes. However, the wishes are granted at a terrible cost. The family wishes for £200 to pay off their mortgage. The next day, their son is killed at a factory and they're given £200 in compensation. 10 days after the funeral, the family wishes for their son back, and his mutilated body walks slowly up the driveway towards their home. The truth behind this story is that there are in fact relics, including cursed monkey paws and rabbit feet, which you can buy at certain shops. These items have been known to bring with them terrible misfortune. However, those who buy them are not aware of this. Number 10 is the Rockford Girl. During the 1970s in Rockford, Illinois, the Neal family had a series of ghostly encounters with the spirit of a young girl. The first member of the Neal family to experience this was their 2-year-old daughter, Laura, who screamed at night because a girl with blonde hair would come through the ceiling while she slept to talk to her. After this, several family members saw the girl inside that house. The Neals soon realized that each time they saw the apparition, something bad would happen soon after. With a little research, the mother of the family, Carol, discovered that a young girl had passed away in their house years previous in an accident. Now when the family sees her, they know to be extra cautious, as her presence is an omen that something terrible is about to happen. Number 9 is First Responder. One night in 2018, a Vermont hotel called the Reedsboro Inn caught fire. A resident and a guest did their best to combat it, but while no one else was staying at the inn that night, they most certainly were not alone. As the guest raced downstairs to grab another extinguisher, he heard the screams of a woman yelling, "Get out, the inn is on fire." No woman was ever discovered in the building despite being heard by both men. As it turns out, in 1932, a woman named Teresa died in a previous fire at that inn. After the fire in 2018, a picture was taken of the inn, showing the shadowy figure of a woman in the attic window. Many believe the woman in the picture was the ghost of Teresa, and what the men heard that night was both a warning to the living and Teresa reliving the fire which consumed her body years previous. Number 8 is Ma Barker. When retired police patrolman Donald J. Weiss visited an infamous house in Ocklawaha, Florida, he got more than he bargained for. The house was the location of the longest FBI shootout in history. It took place in 1935 as the FBI unloaded over 2,000 bullets into the house in an attempt to arrest a notorious crime gang, allegedly led by their mother, Ma Barker. Ma was killed during the gunfight, and when Patrolman Weiss visited the house years later, he heard the eerie disembodied voice of a woman telling him to get out. The thing is, he didn't listen and instead took a picture of the house. As he developed the picture, he then had a heart attack. The picture revealed a grim apparition in the frame. Weiss survived his heart attack, but he remained adamant that it was brought about by the vengeful hand of Ma Barker from beyond the grave. Number 7 is Highway 666. One truck driver experienced something strange on Highway 666, and that experience contained a warning. One night, he was heading down a highway. As his truck dipped over the peak of a high climb and descended, the driver began to feel uncomfortable, not knowing why he was so uneasy. But the dread he felt soon made itself known. The driver turned around and saw a man in a flannel shirt sitting next to him in the passenger seat. Thinking he was hallucinating, the driver remarked out loud, "I must be driving too fast." The man next to him nodded, and then the driver slammed on the brakes. The passenger then vanished, and the driver later learned that years previously, a man had lost his life speeding on that road, and that he occasionally appears to warn others so the same doesn't happen to them. Number 6 is the Phantom Black Dogs. Throughout history, the ghosts of animals have appeared as an omen for future tragic events. But while these stories come out of the history books, those same encounters still happen today. Across the Staffordshire moorlands in England, several people have encountered 3 large black dogs with glowing eyes, which are said to haunt places attached to tragedy. They're said to be attracted to areas where a murder has or is about to be committed. Seeing as the moors in England have been the site of many disappearances and murders, witnesses do not take any encounter with these phantom dogs lightly. Locals know that when one is seen, that it's a warning that something terrible is about to happen. For this reason, hikers often turn back and head straight for the nearest village or town as soon as a phantom appears. Number 5 is the Demon House. Zak Bagans has investigated hundreds of alleged hauntings in his TV series Ghost Adventures. One such instance, however, was so terrifying that it had to be explored in a feature film called Demon House. Several people who had lived in the house had encountered something malevolent there, and when Zak Bagans invited a fellow investigator to the house, he was taken over by an entity and eventually ended up in the hospital. However, Zak did not heed these warnings and instead locked himself inside the house overnight, hoping to capture evidence of the haunting. During the night, he was approached by something growling. Soon after, Zak developed permanent vision problems. To ensure no one else is cursed by the entity, he had the house bulldozed, and now wishes he had listened to the spirit's warning. Number 4 is the backseat driver. Melissa Kurt's daughter did what many do these days. She took a selfie. But the resulting image contained a stark warning of a supernatural kind. Melissa was driving her 13-year-old daughter Harper to a beauty pageant 45 minutes away. During the drive, Melissa's daughter began taking selfies, and the first few images appeared normal. But the final image revealed the ghostly face of a young boy in the back seat of the car, peering over the girl's shoulder. When Melissa later saw the image after the drive, she realized that it had been taken where a car crash had happened a year previously. A young boy died as the result of the crash. Melissa and her daughter are convinced that the reason he was peering over Harper's shoulder was because she wasn't wearing a seatbelt, perhaps the very thing which led to the boy's death. Number 3 is Paul Byrne. Sharon Tate was a famous actress in the 1960s. She was a rising star at the time and widely considered to be one of the most beautiful women on the planet. But tragically, her life was cut short in brutal fashion. She was murdered by Charles Manson's cult. Before her tragic demise, Sharon Tate received what is now considered a warning from the spirit world. She was staying at a friend's house where a man named Paul Byrne had committed suicide many years before. During the night, the ghost of Byrne entered the room. Frightened, Tate left the room and headed downstairs, and it was there that she saw the body of a mutilated figure which quickly vanished. Whatever was in that house was trying to warn Sharon about her ultimate fate, clearly hoping to avoid another tragedy. Number 2 is Husband Calling. In 2001, a woman known as Fern lost her husband. Filled with grief, it took a long time for her to meet another man. But when she did, her friends and family were suspicious of him. They believed that he was taking advantage of her grief for financial gain. At first, Fern wouldn't listen, but when she began to have lucid dreams about her dead husband visiting her, she knew something was wrong. After that, orbs of light began appearing in her home, and in some of the photographs she took at that time. The final warning from Fern's dead husband came as a phone call. The call happened during the night, but Fern missed it. Thankfully, she saw the caller ID had come from her dead husband's phone, and she knew that it was not possible. He was clearly trying to warn her of the dangerous man in her life. And number 1 is the living ghost. We associate apparitions with the deceased, but in some instances, ghosts of the living have appeared to warn others of an impending danger. In one instance, Maria Morris from Dorset in England saw the ghost of her father while he was still alive. At first, the ghost appeared as a white mist, but soon formed the unmistakable figure of her dad. Then, 2 days later at 5:30 a.m., Maria woke up with chest pains. She recovered and was informed that at that same moment, her father had passed away. Some researchers believe that paranormal entities are able to cross between different time periods. Others suggest that spirits can manipulate themselves to look like others. Whether it was her father's ghost or the spirit of someone else appearing as him, there's no doubt that it was warning Maria to prepare for her impending loss. Number 10 is Grandma the Angel. In early 2010, a woman identified only as Lissa was speeding down a road on her way to a date when she suddenly lost control of her car while taking a sharp turn. Crashing over the guardrail, her car rolled down an embankment and came to a stop out of view of the street. Exactly 1 year before that horrible night, Lissa's grandmother left this world due to illness, leaving her grandmother her gold necklace, which Lissa wore at all times. After the car flipped end over end, she unknowingly squeezed the charm and somehow her grandmother came to her aid. When the car did stop, every window was broken, the doors completely smashed in, and the interior torn to shreds, except where Lissa sat. Miraculously, she walked away with only a sore shoulder. Her mere survival absolutely baffled doctors, and her explanation was that of a paranormal one, that her grandmother saved her life. Number 9 is Duran's wife. Many years ago, a Chicago farmer named Charles Henry Durand was riding home late at night when his horse suddenly stopped right in the middle of the road and began to tremble in fear. Before he could get the animal calmed down or moving again, Durand felt a presence and turned to see a woman's image take shape inside of a faint light beside the wagon. He recognized the spirit's voice as his own wife, who had died sometime earlier. She warned him not to go home and then suddenly disappeared. Shrugging the eerie event off, he went home anyway, but approached cautiously. If he hadn't encountered the ghost of his wife, he wouldn't have noticed the trap that was set for him. A window had been broken open and a gun had been set up with a tripwire. Somebody wanted him dead, and if he simply had entered, he would have been killed. But miraculously, he lived, thanks to his dead wife's message. Number 8 is Sonia's husband. In January of 2016, 50-year-old Sonia Burton was at work at Gala Bingo Hall in Ashington, Northumberland, England, when tragedy struck her. She suddenly collapsed, having suffered a severe heart attack. Her manager, Karen Arkle, performed CPR until paramedics arrived, taking over and transferring Sonia to the hospital. Nobody seemed to give up, even though Sonia was technically dead for 56 minutes. While doctors struggled to bring her back, Sonia was visited by her husband, John, who had died in 2004. John's ghost encouraged her to get back to her children, claiming that it was not her time. Most medical experts would have given up after several minutes, let alone an hour, but they didn't, and Sonia woke up and made a full recovery. To this day, she insists that the reason that the doctors did not stop, even after all of that time, was because of John. Number 7 is Dale Earnhardt. On July 18th, 2004, Dale Earnhardt Jr. was involved in a terrifying accident. The NASCAR driver was practicing on a track at Sonoma Raceway in Sonoma County, California, when he lost control and struck the wall. Seconds after his Chevrolet Corvette C5R finally came to a stop, it suddenly burst into flames thanks to a damaged fuel filler neck. Earnhardt Jr. suffered second-degree burns to his thighs and chin, but somehow got out of the vehicle, seemingly by his own power. It wasn't until several days later, when the 29-year-old had shaken off the crash, that it came to light that he felt his father help him from the car. He still doesn't remember the moments being unbuckled from his seatbelt and laying down on a stretcher, only that his father's spirit forced him out of the flames. Number 6 is Avery of the Pink Palace. In the case of one particular ghost in Louisville, Kentucky, anyone who enters his domain is more so protected than tormented. Initially a gentleman's club and casino, the Pink Palace was transformed into apartments in the 1970s, which is when its mysterious ghost, a southern gentleman named Avery, began appearing to living residents. Described as a well-groomed older man in fancy clothes, Avery has saved more than one life within the Pink Palace's walls. He appeared before one woman, scaring her into fleeing her bathroom, just as a cement block came through the window and crashed into the very place that her head was moments earlier. He's also warned people of fires before they broke out and stopped accidents. He may be a terrifying presence, but his heart is in the right place. Number 5 is the Naked Woman. On the night of June 10th, 1994, Deborah Hoyt awoke at a relative's house in Sacramento, California, with an overwhelming urge to leave. Waking her husband, the pair sped off, only to come upon a naked woman laying at the side of the road. They notified police, who found no trace of anyone at the location that they specified. However, days later, Deputy Rich Strasser, who couldn't shake Hoyt's story, went back to the roadside and searched the woods. At the bottom of a steep ravine, he found a car belonging to 24-year-old Christine Skubish. Inside, he discovered 3-year-old Nick Skubish, Christine's son. He was barely alive after 5 days of no food or water, but incredibly survived. Christine had died shortly after the impact, but it's her ghost that Hoyt believes summoned her and thus saved the young boy's life. Number 4 is the Blue Lady. Since 1927, the Moss Beach Distillery has been a popular restaurant in Northern California. Situated on the cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean, it has awesome views, but equally awesome dangers. One false step and the horizon is the last beautiful thing you'll ever see. But lucky for the clumsy and unlucky, there's a Blue Lady, the spirit of a beautiful young woman in a blue dress who lost her life because of those cliffs. While some stories claim it was an accident, others say that she took her own life. Either way, she now protects people from falling, especially young children who see an opportunity to play in the precarious conditions. The Blue Lady is a beloved ghost, and the restaurant's own website promotes the fact that she's been seen many times on the premises, challenging people to look for her when they visit. Number 3 is the Old Nurse. Nurses have a tough gig, dealing with the weight of multiple lives in their hands at the same time. That can certainly take a huge toll, especially if they're new on the job. Well, luckily for any new nurses, at one particular but unidentified hospital in the United States, there's a veteran nurse around to help them out. Mind you, she hasn't been on the payroll since she died many years ago. When a recently graduated nurse named Ruby began at the hospital in question, she quickly found herself in over her head, with 8 sick patients and only 1 assistant to have her back. But late into her shift, an older nurse in a very old uniform began informing her of patients in distress. Many of them were saved that night by the old nurse, who, Ruby, was later told wasn't a living person, but the ghost of a previous head nurse. Number 2 is the mother in the car. On March 8, 2015, emergency responders in Spanish Fork, Utah, arrived at a heart-stopping scene in which a young woman, 25-year-old Jennifer Grosbeck, had collided with a cement barrier on a bridge, lost control of her vehicle, and ended up in a lake. It was nearly 14 hours before emergency workers reached her red Dodge sedan, aided by the cries of the woman for help, desperate to save her 3-year-old daughter, Lily, who was strapped in the back seat, her head inches from the freezing water. They managed to pull Lily from the wreck, but to everyone's alarm, Jennifer had died shortly after impact, meaning the voice couldn't have been hers. The police and firefighters at the scene all heard the voice, and paramedics couldn't explain how Lily survived for 14 hours in those conditions. And number 1 is the Gray Man. Though his name sounds like the title of a horror movie, the Gray Man appears to be more interested in saving people than scaring them. In fact, if you asked around about this South Carolina ghost, you'll find people seem to be happy that he's haunting the region. A number of stories have been told of people encountering the ghost, who most often appears as an unidentified grayish young man before a major storm. He's been known to warn local residents that they need to leave the area or find shelter before winds and rain take them away, and in a number of stories, he's given people just enough time to escape the storm with their lives. There are even tales of him appearing in people's homes, only to have those particular buildings virtually untouched after a hurricane passes. Some people call him a ghost and other a guardian angel. Number 10 is St. Peter's Seminary. Built in 1966, St. Peter's Seminary in Cardross, Scotland, was to be a seat of learning for the priesthood. Slowly but surely, however, it gained a demonic reputation. After shutting down as a seminary, the building was repurposed as a drug rehabilitation center. By the end of the 1980s, it was completely abandoned. Since then, fire, vandalism, and the elements have eaten away at the building, and yet still it stands. The Catholic Church still pays to ensure the building and has described it as an albatross around the church's neck. Ghostly sightings such as phantom priests, spectral screams, and spontaneous fires have all been recorded there by those brave enough to sneak into this place. All attempts to renovate it have failed, and some believe this is due to the ghostly figures which stalk its abandoned rooms and halls. Number 9 is the Sheriff's House. The Cater House in Buffalo, New York was one of the most haunted houses in America. It was so haunted, in fact, that it was boarded up, left to rot, and eventually demolished in 2013 in order to remove the source of spiritual infestation once and for all. Like many such places, the house had a checkered history of both accidents and tragedies, but it was only once it became vacant due to foreclosure in 1968 that the malevolent spirits really took over. Many have seen the apparition of Sheriff Donald Caters, who was the house's last resident. It was said that the muffled, angry voice of the sheriff could be heard inside the dilapidated structure. Trespassers were urged not to enter the house due to its fragile state, but some believe this was a cover story and that the true threat came from a vengeful spirit. Number 8 is 300 Kim Ma. This bizarre house in Vietnam is both forbidden and haunted. Originally constructed to be the Bulgarian embassy, it was abandoned for an unknown reason. Unlike many of the surrounding homes, the building is relatively new, but no less feared than a creaking old mansion. Most in the neighborhood refused to set foot in the building, and despite efforts as recent as 2014, no one was willing to renovate it and move in. Experts in Vietnam have concluded that the land upon which it lies is bad, and this cursed land has brought about the terrifying apparitions as well as noises that occur there. Most frightening of all are the descriptions of floating white entities with glowing eyes which have attacked those brave enough to enter the abandoned building. 300 Kim Ma is now owned by the government and is still off limits. Number 7 is Chao Ni number 81. This house in Beijing is one of the most famous haunted houses in China. Because of incomplete historical records, no one is certain who built the house. One theory is that it was completed in 1910 and was owned by a man who fled the country, leaving his wife or mistress behind. This ties into the terrifying ghost which is often encountered there. During the 1960s, communist guards moved in but soon fled. Stories circulated that they were chased from the residence by an unspeakably grotesque spirit. Lying empty for so many years, locals feared the house, citing blood-curdling screams which emanated from it, especially during thunderstorms. In just the last year, attempts have been made to renovate the house and restore it, but for some, this will only enrage the spirits who walk there even more. Number 6 is Manuel Varela House. Known as the Devil House, this abandoned mansion in Colombia has a macabre history. The mansion was owned by a man named Manuel Varela. He was a physician, but instead of healing people, it was rumored that he carried out yearly sacrifices and made a pact with the devil. Varela arrived in the area in 1908 from abroad and quickly accumulated wealth. Many believed at the time that he was sacrificing his loved ones who disappeared mysteriously, and by doing so was rewarded in turn with further fortunes. Those who live nearby today say that the abandoned house and its grounds are a hive of paranormal activity, and few dare go there at night. Some go as far as to say that a shadowy figure has been seen walking through the grounds and is none other than the devil himself. Number 5 is Bern's Ghost House. In the city of Bern, Sweden, there is a medieval house which has a notorious reputation as one that you would not want to sleep in. For much of its most recent life, it has remained uninhabited, abandoned to silence itself. There have been several ghostly encounters at number 54 Junkerngasse. One of the most compelling involves repeated eyewitnesses who have seen the body of a headless woman staring at one of the windows as they walked past. Many have seen this ghost most often just after midnight. Those who have seen her say that her appearance is accompanied by a horrid cackling laugh. Despite being in a desirable part of the town, the house continues to scare away any brave guest and has remained on the market for some time. Number 4 is the most haunted house in Korea. This old 2-story building in South Korea is feared by many for more than just its loneliness, and when tourists ask to see it, many tell them not to go for fear of disturbing evil spirits which haunt it. The building can be found north of Pohang Town and is often known as Yeongdeokdae Ghost House. No one knows why it's abandoned, as in its heyday during the 1980s, it would have been an attractive house with beautiful countryside around it. Several paranormal groups and television crews have investigated the house, picking up the sounds of strange disembodied voices, as well as seeing apparitions of soldiers on the property. It has recently been revealed that the house sits on top of a mass grave, which is now seen as the cause of the activity. Number 3 is Kulban House. This 19th century mansion in Ireland has developed a fearsome reputation as a paranormal hotspot. Built between 1840 and 1855, the house was once a lavish spectacle for its owner, Francis Bruin, who built it for his bride-to-be. The family had no children, and with its owner spending most of his time in London, the house and its sprawling grounds were overseen by a fearsome landlord. As the Bruin family withered away, by 1911, it was occupied by 4 servants and then burned to the ground by the IRA in 1923. Several apparitions haunt the ruins, but it is the ghost of a servant girl which has caused most distress to those trying to visit it. She was struck by lightning while standing next to a window. Her outline burned into the glass. Many believe her anguished spirit brought about the eventual destruction of the house. Number 2 is the Old Stone House. Known as the Herrera House, the Old Stone House can be found in Tayong in the Philippines. Built in 1927, the house has a creepy colonial appearance with lifeless stone statues staring blankly at visitors. It's been abandoned for some time, and with good reason. The house was used by Japanese soldiers during the occupation there, and it's said many atrocities were committed within the house. Those atrocities have left an imprint, with visitors hearing the shackled footsteps of spectral prisoners of war shuffling across the stone floors. The rooms inside have been stripped of its past regal appearance, but several other spirits continue to haunt the emptiness. This includes an elderly couple, a headless apparition, and another lady whose children can be seen but who remains invisible to any adult. And number 1 is Al Jazeera Al Hamra. This is more than just one haunted house. It's actually an entire village which once housed nearly 3,000 people. Local competing groups laid claim to the village throughout the early 20th century, resulting in an agreement for most of the people living there to leave. However, some believe that there's more to it than that. Those who still live in the region believe that the empty, abandoned houses attracted something from the wilderness. They believe the houses are now haunted by powerful demonic entities known as jinn. Brave souls who visit the derelict village have seen creeping demonic figures between the crumbling buildings. Visitors are encouraged to leave the houses alone at night, but several people have ignored this warning and ran afoul of the jinn, who are said to feast on the flesh of the living. Number 10 are creepy clowns. Unless you've been living a life that doesn't include online videos or social media, by now you've likely seen the clips of scary killer clowns in prank and scare videos. But while most of these masked figures are giving birthday clowns a bad name in a harmless way, simply waiting for a victim to scare with fake murders and other antics, elsewhere, like in Jackson, Florida, other more devious things are going down. Video from surveillance cameras have captured multiple characters doing far more threatening things, such as walking onto people's property and porches while posing for the camera, and in one instance, tearing a Halloween jack-o'-lantern into pieces with their bare hands, while their psychotic grin remains frozen on their masks. Other videos show clowns making threatening gestures while staring right into security cameras, all while standing on a private home's porch. A large number of arrests have been made, not just in the United States, but all over North America and the United Kingdom. It's just a matter of time before one of these clowns makes your nightmare a reality. Number 9 is an insane car crash. On July 30th, 2016, a car was traveling down a highway in DeLand, Florida, when it careened off, struck a mailbox, and then became airborne, flipping over several times before landing upside down in a parking lot at the side of the road. A security camera for a local business caught the entire shocking event, which became even more terrifying when the front end of the vehicle caught fire, sending smoke up in plumes. windows. Witnesses grabbed fire extinguishers to put out the fire before attempting to get the sole occupant out of the vehicle, only to discover that the car was so heavily demolished in the horrific crash that they couldn't pull him through the window. Instead, the growing group of bystanders flipped the car, cut through the man's seatbelt, and managed to pull him through the sunroof. Amazingly, the man survived, but not everyone is as lucky. Number 8 is a home invasion. Our homes are meant to be our safe places, places we can be ourselves and not worry about the negative events of the outside world. But when that safe feeling is taken away, real fear sets in. On February 20th, 2017, individuals forced their way into the apartment of an unidentified business owner, assaulting him and robbing him while he bled out. A surveillance camera in the North York Toronto condo caught the home invaders on film, as one shot the man in the shoulder before a second man stabbed him repeatedly in the head with a screwdriver. 4 out of the 5 people involved in the assault, 2 men and 2 women, were shortly after arrested, mostly due to one of the men still wearing his ankle monitor that he was ordered to wear after being released from prison. This random attack happened so quickly and so intensely, it makes you wonder if it could happen to you. You may want to go check that your doors are locked right now. Number 7 are traffic twins. So much goes unexplained about twins. How do they know when the other is injured or killed? How can some pairs communicate without speaking? And in this case, why did both have to run into oncoming traffic together? In this shocking video, captured by closed-circuit traffic cameras, 2 twins, Sabrina and Ursula Erickson, can be seen walking along the median between 2 lanes of the M6 motorway near the city of Kiel in England. As authorities approached them, they unexpectedly fled into oncoming traffic as the pair ran out in front of cars where Sabrina was struck and suffered injuries. Shortly after, when police managed to seemingly calm the girls down at the side of the motorway, the pair broke away from them and ran back into the path of traffic, this time getting them both struck. Experts claim that the pair suffered a shared psychosis, which caused them to act erratically. A psychosis that they still cannot explain to this day. Number 6 is the Fresno Nightcrawler. Every city has their own local monster legend, and for the city of Fresno, California, that monster is the Fresno Nightcrawler. According to legend, a family was growing tired of being awakened in the middle of the night by the sound of their dogs barking at something in the woods nearby. In an attempt to determine what it was that stalked the property, they put up a security camera on their garage, only to discover that what was moving about late at night was an unusual white sheet-wearing creature that strode with legs far too long for a real person. Numerous individuals have come forward with eyewitness accounts and surveillance footage of these creatures, which have also been referred to as the Fresno aliens or stick figure aliens. Unfortunately for experts who aim to study these creatures, the footage has been lost over time. However, it's very likely that they're still out there stalking in the night. Number 5 is the burglar in baby's room. What could possibly be scarier for a parent than watching as a stranger who's just broken into their home stands creepily over their baby's crib? That's just what happened to one family in West Harris County, Texas, on April 5th, 2014, when their baby monitor's motion-activated camera caught 18-year-old Christopher Gomez as he crept about the infant's bedroom. At one point during the disturbing footage, he's seen standing right over the sleeping baby and staring down at it. Gomez entered the house through an unlocked first-floor window and proceeded to search the home with the aid of a flashlight. Authorities reported that even though the man seemed to know his burglary was being recorded on a video camera, he went about with his thieving anyway. Gomez was ultimately caught due to the anonymous family releasing the video of him and his creepy actions in their nursery. Makes you wonder how often you actually check that your windows are locked. Number 4 is Eliza Lamb's elevator ride. On February 19, 2013, the naked body of a 21-year-old student named Eliza Lamb was pulled from a water tank on top of the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. A resident of Burnaby, British Columbia, Canada, Lamb was on a tour of California while on break from school. Sadly, her tour was cut short, though no one knows exactly why. Lamb had been missing since January 31st, when she'd failed to call her parents as she'd done every day prior. Investigators released the last known images of Eliza, specifically the recordings taken via the surveillance camera in the hotel elevator, which sees the woman acting oddly, pressing several buttons though the lift doors don't close, and she's seen talking to somebody that is unseen. The footage went viral, with many claiming the dark history of murder that the hotel was the site of led to Lamb being possessed by a demented spirit. Officially, her death was ruled as an accident, although it's clear to many that something more diabolical was afoot. Number 3 is the Miami Zombie. For decades, the thought of a zombie outbreak has terrified millions upon millions of people, with many actually preparing their homes and families for the forthcoming zombie apocalypse. Of course, many laughed at these individuals. That is, until May 26, 2012, when a vicious attack in Miami, Florida changed things a bit. A homeless man named Ronald Popo was sitting under a tram bridge when 31-year-old Rudy Eugene approached him. Security footage from multiple cameras, including the most famous angle from the Miami Herald building, saw Eugene strip naked as he walked up to Popo and soon after viciously attacked him. After knocking the man unconscious, Eugene proceeded to consume most of the flesh from the victim's face, even eating his left eye. The unbelievable event culminated in an officer shooting Eugene dead. Given the nature of the attack, hazmat officials had to be called onto the scene, and to this day, no further explanation has been given. Number 2 is the ghost in the cab. After a massive tsunami hit Japan on March 11, 2011, multiple drivers around the country began reporting ghostly apparitions trying to enter, or in some cases floating right into, their vehicles. Some taxi drivers even found that seemingly regular people got into their cabs only to vanish soon after into thin air. In this clip taken from a security camera at a Japanese taxi stop, a man is seen walking towards a car while a translucent, eerie figure follows him. The ghostly image appears to be a woman with black hair who, as the man gets in the cab, incorporeally disappears into the side of it. While some claim that there really is a woman there and it's simply a bad capture of her on the surveillance camera, others point out how she seems to guide the man into the cab before vanishing completely. Next time that you think that you're alone, such as say watching this video, you may want to look around because you may not be. And number 1 is the ghost child. Even the most fearless individuals would likely be heading in the other direction if they ever crossed paths with a ghost, especially if that ghost was a child. Such was the case when a ghostly child was captured in the street by a closed-circuit television camera attached to the UK home of Ian Hawke. In the clip, the translucent figure moves about the street, and Hawke believes it's a child simply playing outside. Of course, this isn't the only time a young specter has been recorded via security footage. Hundreds upon hundreds of people have uploaded surveillance images that they say contain the ghosts of children playing, walking, or even just staring at the camera. Some people believe them to be hoaxes, while others who witnessed the events believe them in their heart to be very real. Number 10 is the Rosenheim poltergeist. German parapsychologist Hans Bender investigated an infamous poltergeist case during the 1960s. As with many similar cases, the Rosenheim poltergeist phenomena revolved around a single person. That person was 19-year-old Anne-Marie Chaberel. Anne-Marie worked at a lawyer's office, and it was there that the strange disturbances took place. It became clear that destructive forces were at play, which made lighting fixtures explode and moved heavy furniture around on their own. Investigators claimed that when Anne-Marie left the office, the activity ceased. Upon investigation, it was discovered that there was a malevolent spirit that was following Anne-Marie around. But unlike many poltergeists who simply leave their torment at home, this one followed her to the workplace and everywhere she went. Number 9 is the Seaford Poltergeist. The Seaford Poltergeist is a well-documented case that took place in Seaford, Long Island back in 1958. During this time, the alleged poltergeist terrorized an entire family in their home, throwing items around such as figurines and constantly opening bottles and pouring out the contents. Frightened by the activity, the family brought in a team of paranormal investigators, including world-famous J.B. Rhine. What Rhine and his colleagues discovered was truly terrifying. What they discovered was recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, the movement of things on their own around the house. In the end, 67 individual disturbances were recorded before the poltergeist suddenly ceased. No one knows why the poltergeist first appeared or why it eventually disappeared. Number 8 is the Great Amherst Mystery. One of the most notorious poltergeist cases in history, the Great Amherst Mystery has never been solved. Taking place in Amherst, Nova Scotia, the poltergeist activity was recorded from 1878 to 1879. Centering on a young woman, Esther Cox, the activity began in the aftermath of Esther being sexually assaulted. That's when strange noises such as knocking, banging, and rustling began happening throughout her home at night. It was then that Esther suddenly became feverish. Objects were thrown violently by an unseen hand, and on the wall above Esther's bed, the words "Esther Cox, you are mine to kill" appeared. In addition, small fires began to break out across the property, and it was quickly discovered that Esther herself was blamed for the arson, although she doesn't remember setting the fires. The poltergeist phenomena continued for years after that, before finally fading away with no explanation. Number 7 is Carol Compton. Carol Compton was at the center of a trial in the 1980s, during which she was accused of being a witch, but some believe that she was actually the victim of a poltergeist. Moving from Scotland to Italy in 1982, Carol became a nanny for the Ricci family. After a series of fires broke out, Carol was let go, despite the authorities claiming that electrical faults had been the cause. After this, Carol became a nanny for another family, but she soon complained about scratching noises in her new home and religious statues being smashed out of sight. When a fire broke out in a child's room, Carol was finally arrested. However, she was found not guilty after it was discovered that it may have been the work of a poltergeist. Though she quickly isolated herself after this incident, strange occurrences continued to happen around her, leading many to believe that she was still haunted by a poltergeist. Number 6 was the Danny Poltergeist. While poltergeist activity often centers on a person or place, it can also attach itself to an object. And that's exactly what happened when it came to the Danny Poltergeist. In 1998, Al Cobb of Savannah, Georgia, bought a vintage bed from the 1800s at auction as a present for his teenage son, Jason. However, just 3 nights later, Jason claimed that something invisible was in bed with him, breathing down his neck. After objects were being thrown on the bed by the poltergeist, Jason's father left a sheet of paper and some crayons in the bedroom, room, asking the spirit to identify itself. That's when Cobb re-entered the room, only to find the name Danny and the number 7 scrawled across the paper. After objects began to be thrown directly at Jason from an unseen hand, he decided no longer to sleep in the antique bed for fear that the poltergeist would become increasingly violent. Kind of makes you wonder where your bed has been, or even what's under it. Number 5 is Thornton Heath. The Thornton Heath poltergeist was an alleged case of supernatural activity which created a storm within the paranormal investigative community. The activity began in 1938 in London and focused on a 35-year-old woman named Miss Forbes. At her home, objects moved on their own, strange sounds emanated from the walls, and Miss Forbes, her husband, and her young son were terrified. The case was investigated by psychologist Nandor Fodor, who observed much of the phenomena, even observing Miss Forbes being choked by an unseen hand. It was later concluded that it was indeed the result of a poltergeist. Miss Forbes was in the clutches of an evil demonic force, one which science has yet to explain. Number 4 is the Mackey poltergeist. In one of the earliest documented instances of poltergeist activity, the Mackey poltergeist in 1696 remains infamous. The family of Andrew Mackey was the focus for the phenomena, which included rocks being thrown, buildings spontaneously catching fire, and disembodied voices crying out. In some of the more harrowing accounts, family members were allegedly beaten by a poltergeist entity and then dragged across the ground. Several notes written in blood were also found. Documented by a local minister, he claimed that Andrew Mackey took an oath to give his firstborn child to the devil, and that his act had welcomed a poltergeist into his home. The activity only ceased when an exorcism was carried out. Today, all that remains of the Mackey farm is the stump of a dead tree, which locals still believe is haunted. Number 3 is the Borley Rectory. Dubbed the most haunted house in England, the Borley Rectory played host to frightening poltergeist activity. Built in 1862 after an earlier house had burned to the ground, the Borley Rectory was home to the local Reverend of Borley Church and his family. Many claimed to see strange apparitions wandering the estate, and the house gained an infamous reputation due to the sound of phantom bells being rung, writing scrawled on the walls, windows shattering, and even residents being thrown from their beds. One of the residents claimed that he had been attacked by something horrible that he could not describe. After numerous investigations by famed investigator Harry Price, the house burned to the ground in 1939. As of today, nothing remains of it, though stories persist of strange lights and sounds coming from where the house once stood. Number 2 is the Enfield poltergeist. The Enfield poltergeist is without a doubt one of the most documented poltergeist cases of all time. Taking place in England between 1977 and 1979, it has been the basis for several books and major motion pictures. Investigated by famed inventor Maurice Grosse, the poltergeist activity focused on the children of a single parent, Peggy Hodgson. Among credible witnesses to the phenomena, a police constable claimed furniture moved on its own, demonic voices appeared out of thin air, and that the children even levitated, as if being lifted up by an unknown force. With this particular poltergeist, it only acted when it was not being watched, and many believe that the Enfield case remains one of the best pieces of documented evidence for the existence of poltergeists. And number 1 is the Columbus poltergeist. This event took place in 1984 and subsequently led to a tragedy. The phenomena revolved around Tina Resch, who was 15 at the time. Investigated by parapsychologist William Roll, Tina and her family claimed that they were preyed upon by a malevolent ghost which threw objects around the house with force. What William Roll discovered was that objects did in fact move by themselves, and that Tina was caught on camera knocking an object over without knowledge of even doing it. It was upon being caught on camera that she immediately told investigators to leave the home. But perhaps the most disturbing of all is that she was later convicted for the death of her 3-year-old daughter, Amber. Her friends and family knew that this could not be her, and that it could only be supernatural forces at play causing her to do these horrific acts. Number 10 is Gina. On April 4th, 1991, the television network ABC aired a special episode of their news program 2020, in which they broadcasted something the host Barbara Walters said was, up to that point, never seen on American television. It was the real-life exorcism of a young girl, referred to only as Gina, the 16-year-old Florida native who was the daughter of a Colombian immigrant, was possessed by a large number of demonic spirits, and the Vatican approved of the evil being vanquished. Reverend James Labar, who was no stranger to overseeing exorcisms, led the charge against the evil forces inside Gina, while the girl screamed at the top of her lungs and barked at everyone in the room. The exorcism took over 6 hours and in the end seemed to bring Gina peace. Number 9 is Clara Germana Salé. If you're looking to get cursed, then making a pact with the devil himself is a pretty clear way to do it. In 1906, when she was just 16 years old, Clara Germana Salé made such a pact, and wound up possessed for her trouble. A student at St. Michael's Mission in Natal, South Africa, the teen began exhibiting unnatural impulses, which frightened those around her. She then began showing signs that she'd become clairvoyant, revealing deep personal secrets of those close to her, and then began walking up the walls. Soon after, Salé began conversing in languages that she had never heard before. Clearly possessed, her exorcism was witnessed by 170 people. During it, she launched Bibles from their places on shelves and made animal noises. The exorcism worked, but not before Salé showed that she could levitate. Number 8 is Danielle. Raised as a member of the Evangelical Church in Winnipeg, Manitoba, a teenager known only as Danielle found herself having doubts about her faith in 2011. She began researching demonology and Satanism and claimed to her friends that she'd been using a Ouija board in an attempt to summon a demon. Unfortunately, Danielle may have gotten exactly what she asked for. After the Ouija board told her that she wasn't alone in her room, she began having headaches and spasms, and kept hearing a hissing sound. Turning back to her church, Danielle was brought in for an exorcism, where not 1 but 3 demons took up residence in the young woman. The exorcism sent away at least one of the demons, but Danielle fears the other 2 are laying dormant, waiting for the perfect moment to arise. Number 7 is Ronald Edwin Hunkler. In January of 1949, after losing his Aunt Harriet to multiple sclerosis, 13-year-old Ronald Edwin Hunkler turned to his Ouija board in an attempt to contact her spirit. It's unclear if he managed to reach her, but what is known is that he began experiencing strange occurrences immediately after. Scratching sounds coming from the floor and walls haunted him while he was in bed, Strange scratches appeared on his body, and his mattress would suddenly move on its own. Ronald was possessed by as many as 10 demons, so an exorcism was requested. The young teen attacked and injured the priest during the first attempt, but a second, more intense exorcism managed to vanquish the evil inside of him. Ronald's ordeal was terrifying, which is why it became the inspiration for the film The Exorcist. Number 6 is Anna Eklund. Referred to as the Earling Possession due to it taking place in Earling, Iowa, this incident took place over decades, but started when the victim was only a teenager. Emma Schmidt, better known by her pseudonym Anna Eklund, began showing signs that she'd been possessed by a demonic presence when she was just 14 years old. She became agitated around holy symbols and was unable to even enter a church. It's believed that Eklund's aunt, a witch, was the cause and the source of the possession taking place. Anna's first exorcism took place on June 18, 1912, and she continued to receive regular exorcisms right up until December 23, 1928, when she was 46 years old. Her case is widely considered to be the most documented out of any demonic possession in history. Number 5 is Elizabeth Knapp. On October 30th, 1671, Samuel Willard, a well-known and respected reverend living in Groton, Massachusetts, began documenting the ever-worsening signs that his servant was possessed by a demonic entity. The servant, a 16-year-old girl named Elizabeth Knapp, first complained about having pains spring up all over her body, and often flew into highly emotional tantrums, sometimes laughing hysterically for no reason, while other times crying and wailing over nothing apparent. Soon after, she began seeing a man floating around her bed and having full body fits in which it would take multiple people just to hold her down. Knapp began speaking in a deep voice and confessed to making a pact with the devil. Willard's journal ends with him saying Knapp needs the help of more qualified individuals. Number 4 is Christy Bemeux. On December 25th, 2010, Christmas Day, 15-year-old Christy Bemeux was ruthlessly beaten and ultimately killed by her sister, 29-year-old Magali Bemeux, and her boyfriend, 28-year-old Eric Bakubi, inside their Newham, East London home. The couple suspected that Christy was possessed by something evil due to feelings they kept having and wished to exorcise whatever it was from the teen's body. They tortured him with knives, metal pieces, sticks, a hammer, and a chisel until Christy couldn't take it anymore and pleaded for death. After torturing the poor boy, Magali and Eric attempted to perform a ritual cleansing in the couple's bathtub, where, unfortunately, Christy drowned. The pair were arrested and charged with the boy's murder. Number 3 is Terence Cottrell. On August 23, 2003, 46-year-old pastor Ray Hemphill was arrested on suspicion of child abuse after he helped perform a prayer service designed to remove evil spirits from an 8-year-old autistic boy named Terence Cottrell. Terence's mother, Patricia Cooper, believed that her son had evil inside of him based on some alarming things the boy would say to her, such as "kill me, take me, kill me." She brought him to Hemphill's church in northern Milwaukee, Wisconsin to get him help, and Hemphill decided an exorcism was the wisest course of action. Forming a circle around the possessed boy, the group held their hands over him and started to pray. Somehow, over the course of forcing out the evil spirits, young Terence lost his life due to asphyxiation. Number 2 is Annalisa Michael. At the age of just 16, Annalisa Michael, a deeply religious girl from West Germany, suffered a severe seizure and was soon after diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy. Unfortunately, this was only the beginning of the problems that she and her family would face as she began showing signs of being possessed. She started hearing dark voices that told her she was damned and began hallucinating whenever she prayed. Annalisa suddenly had a very hard time looking at or even walking past religious symbols such as the crucifix, and she refused to drink water that had been blessed. Things continued to escalate until a pair of priests began a 10-month-long series of exorcisms, performing over 70 in total. These sadly ended with the then 23-year-old Annalisa losing her life to the dark forces. And number 1 is the Ammons family. In January of 2014, Latoya Ammons, her 3 children, and her mother were put in the national spotlight when their stories became news. Located in Gary, Indiana, the Ammons family's home was given the nickname Demon House, and that's what was believed resided with the family. The first sign was a huge number of black flies swarming the screens of the home, despite it being a brisk December when they did so. Creaks, bangs, and footprints followed, but what truly shook Latoya was watching the effect the spirits had on her kids. She witnessed her son walking up a wall backwards, her daughter levitating, and one of them being smacked by unseen forces. Often and without warning, the children would begin speaking in grave tones, as if controlled, all of which led to the local authorities becoming believers as well. Number 10 is the Phoenix family. Joaquin Phoenix's family is most famous for the tragic death of Joaquin's brother, River. However, the family had already gone through a dark and tortured life before River even passed away. Joaquin and River's parents were members of a cult known as the Children of God during the 1970s. This cult, which currently goes by the name the Family International, had an apocalyptic view of the world and a creepy take on the God is love mantra. The cult used sex to convert people while preaching that the world was going to end, and they viewed outsiders as malevolent agents. Luckily, Joaquin and River's parents managed to escape the cult and changed the family's name to Phoenix to symbolize their rebirth into a free society. Number 9 is the Spacey family. Kevin Spacey once had a highly respected life as a film star, but all of that came crumbling down when accusations emerged of his abusive behavior. While in no way an excuse, looking at his family history provides a glimpse into an upbringing which made such predatory behavior more likely. For starters, Kevin Spacey's father was a self-proclaimed disciple of Adolf Hitler. Nazism and hatred of all races other than his own was central to Kevin's dad's lifestyle. His father also led a secret life as an abuser, turning his abhorrent attentions to Kevin's brother Randy. These allegations were made by Kevin's brother himself, bringing more credence to them. Randy claims that Kevin developed a sly personality to avoid conflict with his father, and that this dark family secret is what led to his own abusive behavior. Number 8 is the Stoute family. Diane Stoute had a horrendous life from 2012 onwards. In that same year, her husband died suddenly. Just 5 months later, her autistic son developed seizures and then also passed away. After that, Diane's daughter Sarah was hospitalized with a flu-like illness and then developed brain damage. They say bad luck comes in threes, but this wasn't bad luck at all. The Stoute family had a horrifying secret. Diane had been poisoning her family with antifreeze. Not only that, but she was secretly helped by her other daughter, Rachel. Diane justified her actions by saying that her husband was violent, that her autistic son was too time-consuming, and that her daughter, Sarah, was a financial drain. As for Rachel, she helped Diane commit the murders so that she could have her mother's attention all to herself. Number 7 is the Howell family. After an unsuccessful marriage in the 1980s, UK dentist Colin Howell remarried. His new wife was called Kylie Jorgensen, and they had a happy life together. Colin became a reputable member of his community and went on to have children with his wife. However, both Colin and Kylie had a dark family secret. Colin confessed to Kylie that he had murdered his previous wife. He'd been in an affair at the time, and he and his mistress decided to kill both of their partners and make it look like an accident. While Colin wanted to hand himself to the police out of guilt, Kylie persuaded him that she could keep his secret safe and that he needed to stay out of prison for their kids. 10 years later, the guilt became too much for Colin, and he finally confessed to the authorities. He received a 21-year prison sentence for his crimes. Number 6 is the Uden family. Alice and Gerald Uden were a happily married couple with children. In their 70s, they were described by neighbors as being quiet and courteous. No one could have known the secrets that they shared. Alice had been previously married. Her husband disappeared in 1974, and Gerald had also been previously married. But his wife and their 2 children disappeared in 1980. When Alice and Gerald met, they had a lot in common. Alice had shot her first husband and buried his body down an abandoned gold mine. Gerald had also killed, but his crimes were much worse. He'd murdered his first wife and their 2 children, hiding their bodies in oil drums at the bottom of a lake. When their crimes finally came to light in 2014, they were sent to prison. But despite this, their daughter Erica says she has no choice but to still love them both. Number 5 is the Tetzlaff family. Victoria Tetzlaff of Argentina grew up believing that her father was a hero. She believed that he had dedicated himself to protect their country from enemies within and without. But Lieutenant Colonel Hernan Tetzlaff had a secret so cruel and evil that he tried desperately to keep it from his daughter. Hernan Tetzlaff was responsible for the theft of hundreds of babies. Taken from their families during the Argentinian dictatorship of 1976, the children were stolen from those who opposed the dictatorship and given to other families. The parents were then often tortured and killed. Hernan Tetzlaff was responsible for it all, but adding even more pain to this family revelation was the fact that his own daughter, Victoria, was a victim too. Hernan had stolen her from a family, had them killed, then raised her as his own. Number 4 is the Aguilar family. The Aguilar family secret is one of the darkest on this list. Veronica Aguilar was 39 years old at the time, living in Los Angeles with her family. But what neighbors and her own husband didn't know was that Veronica had imprisoned her son, Jonathan, inside a closet. With her husband, Jonathan's stepfather, working away and rarely home, Veronica was able to convince relatives and friends that Jonathan had been looked after in an institute. People had no reason to question this, as they knew Jonathan had severe autism. After being kept in the closet for 3 years, being sedated most of the time, and malnourished by his own mother, Jonathan passed away. When Jonathan's stepfather discovered the truth, Veronica was arrested, and her family finally learned of her horrific crimes. Number 3 is the Brandt family. Sometimes a creepy family secret is revealed, but not by someone confessing, but through a family member's terrifying actions. That's what occurred in the tragic case of the Brandt family. When Michelle Jones of Orlando invited her uncle, Charlie Brandt, to stay with her in 2004, she couldn't have foreseen the inevitable. Charlie arrived with his wife, Terry. Brandt then stabbed his wife 7 times, beheaded Michelle, and then hanged himself. No one knew why a man of no history of violence would do such a terrible thing. That is, until his family secret was revealed. Charlie had murdered his own pregnant mother when he was just 13, but that secret had been kept from the rest of his family, including Michelle and Terry. Perhaps if they had known about his previous crime, they would never have allowed him into their lives. But of course, it was much too late. Number 2 is the Harrelson family. Woody Harrelson grew up in the 1960s with no contact with his real father. He always wondered why, but when he overheard a radio broadcast talking about a man with the same name as his father, the twisted truth was revealed. Harrelson's father, Charles, was a killer. He had been found guilty of murder. Most notably, he was responsible for the first assassination of a US judge in the 20th century. As it turned out, Charles Harrelson was a hitman. He had been hired several times to kill people. But in a bizarre turn of events, he was also present during the assassination of JFK and told Woody Harrelson that he was involved. Photographs show Charles Harrelson dressed as a homeless person at the scene of JFK's assassination, and many believe that he was the second gunman that fateful day. And number 1 is the Phillips family. One of the creepiest family secrets has to be that of the Phillips family. In 1979, 19-year-old Mackenzie Phillips was on the eve of her wedding day. That night, Mackenzie's father arrived with the intention of stopping the wedding from even taking place. Both Mackenzie and her father were heavy drug users, and while they discussed Mackenzie's upcoming marriage, they took heroin. Without getting too far into the horrid details, Mackenzie claims that her father committed incest and that this occurred many times for several years. Her father, John Phillips, was a famous musician at the time, and so Mackenzie's horrific experiences only became known after his death, when she felt comfortable in telling her story. Since then, Mackenzie has campaigned on behalf of other incest survivors, hoping that others will come forward.